Season's greetings, everybody, and welcome to Adapt or Perish, episode 107, and our long delayed follow up to episode number 6, our original look at Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. We'll start unwrapping our look at 9 new screen adaptations of the classic story in just a moment, but first, our next episode. On November 26th, the musical theater world lost a legend in Stephen Sondheim, and these two theater kids wanted to pay our respects. So, in our next episode, we're going to take a close look at Sondheim's Into the Woods. We'll be discussing the original musical, the film performance from 1991 featuring Bernadette Peters, and the 2014 film adaptation with Meryl Streep, Emily Blunt, and Anna Kendrick. That'll be out in 2 weeks on Tuesday, January 4th. Lastly, I wanted to give a quick content warning before we get started. I wouldn't have expected to talk about this in front of an episode about A Christmas Carol, but the last version we talk about today gets kind of heavy. Our conversation is going to reference some pretty bad stuff that happens to kids, including sexual assault and drowning. As always, we just wanted to give you the option of skipping either that part of the discussion or the whole episode. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode or any others that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adaptorperishcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/adaptcast. We've got a patron-only community and our bi-weekly bonus show, Adapt or Perish Plus, with episodes releasing every Tuesday between episodes of this show. We hope you check it out. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adaptorperishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapt or Perish, episode 107, A Christmas Carol, part 2. Hello and welcome to Adapt or Perish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
I'm Ari Lipshaw. Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho.
Season's greetings.
Happy Christmas, everybody.
Happy Christmas and
And a Merry Christmas to you all.
And a gleeful New Year.
We haven't missed it.
The spirits did it all in one night.
Well, of course they could.
They can do anything they like.
Okay, welcome back to the two of you who listened to part 1 of A Christmas Carol.
This is no exaggeration.
And thought, you know what? I don't know if I want to listen to any more of the show, but I'll come back when they do part 2. I hope the last 4 years have treated you well.
It's been great for everyone. I'm sure nothing's wrong in the world with anyone. It's been a great 4 years.
Well, I listened to that episode again. What children we were.
What sweet summer souls.
And I said at the end of that episode that, hey, you know what? There's so many more Christmas carols to do. Why don't we do this again next year?
I want to tell you, I didn't think we'd still be doing the show at the same time next year. So it was an enforced promise.
I mean, so this was part of our original 6, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Boy, it's rough.
Yeah, I would not go. I mean,
rough.
You listened to it. I could not bear to. You said it holds up in terms of like our opinions.
Our opinions are good. I stand by them.
But at the time, we were very concerned that like we couldn't just sit down and talk. We had to have a structure. We had to like discuss each thing in like a unique way. So we did some kind of weird like head-to-head thing with like the different characters and everything.
We talked about each one first and talked about whether we liked it. Then we listed out all the characters from most minor to most important.
Yeah.
And then talked about how they compared across all the versions, which like didn't make for a boring conversation.
It's just we don't really do that anymore.
No, now we just kind of talk about everything. Turns out chronological order was our friend.
Did we do a plot summary, or was it one of the ones where we were just like, everybody knows the plot, we're not going to do a summary?
No, we did a plot summary. Our plot summary was pretty funny, actually. Yeah. Can I paraphrase it?
Yeah.
Ebenezer Scrooge is this dick, and then all these spirits come to him and say, don't be a dick anymore. And he's like, I'm not a dick anymore.
That's it.
Tiny Tim.
So we're not going to do a plot summary of the book. We did not reread the book for this episode.
Like, I actually
if you have never been exposed to A Christmas Carol in any form and really need a plot summary, I will direct you to episode 1.
Yeah.
However, I am sure that this episode will be fine on its own without listening to that if you don't care to.
I think there's a lot of good stuff we get into, and we might reference it and reference some of the ideas. I would recommend listening to part 1 because we're not going to talk about Muppets very much in this episode because we did that in part 1.
We're going to talk about Muppets a little bit.
Well, a little bit, but not as much.
Yeah.
Not as much. I thought it might be nice to just kind of remind ourselves of what we talked about last time.
Okay.
And then jump into the slate we have for today. Does that sound good to you?
Sure.
So chronologically, we started with 1951's A Christmas Carol, starring Alastair Sim.
Mm-hmm.
What was our reaction to that one?
Liked it.
We liked it.
Oh, we weren't doing the quadrants then. We hadn't figured that out.
No, we were doing the quadrants.
Were we doing it?
Yeah, that was something we were doing right from the beginning.
All right, fair enough.
The one thing that I'd kind of forgotten about, but it reminded me when I re-listened to it, it is very long, and they add a lot of stuff to it. Do you remember how much stuff they add to the Ghost of Christmas
No,
Past?
I do remember that. Yeah. Like the whole thing about like them buying and selling the Fezziwig's business and like that board remember that board meeting that goes on for a really long time?
Mm-hmm.
But I like it.
But it's great. It's great, and we liked it. Then 1984, Christmas Carol starring George C. Scott.
We did not like
which
it.
I loved for 5 minutes,
Yeah.
and then it lost me completely, and it turned out to be not very much fun.
Yeah.
Then Muppet Christmas Carol with Michael Caine and the Muppets.
By all accounts, a perfect film.
It's a perfect movie.
Yes.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Sure.
Then 1999's A Christmas Carol starring Patrick Stewart.
Yep.
TV version, which we also really enjoy.
Liked.
And then Disney's A Christmas Carol 2009 starring Jim Carrey.
Which we did not like and will never watch again.
I hated it.
Yeah, it was
but
not good.
No, there's no but. It was just a pickle to watch.
Yep.
And,
all right.
And made us feel bad and sad. And not in a fun way.
Well, I think that was part of why we wanted to structure the episode in that weird way, because we were like, well, we can't just like end on something we didn't like. That's a bummer. But now we do that all the time.
Now we do it constantly.
Yeah.
I think we should get started because we have 9 more to talk about.
Yeah.
And before we do, I have kind of 2 thoughts to throw out here at the beginning.
Yeah.
If I may. May I stand up on my little soapbox? Hello, everybody. I have 2 thoughts about A Christmas Carol as we proceed. The first is this. This might be a perfect story in one specific way. This story weirdly can survive any adaptation. I'm willing to make that pronouncement.
Okay.
Like whatever you want to do with A Christmas Carol on the whole, like the high level version of it, the book in the world, it will survive just fine. There have been so many versions made of it. It can survive anything. And what we watched was so varied. And some were incredibly intense and geared towards adults, and some were very, very light and geared towards children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it works anyway.
Okay.
Any way you want to do it, it works. I'm going to specifically call back Treasure Island, which we just did.
Yeah.
And we kind of came out of that going, well, when Robert Louis Stevenson wrote it, the idea is that it's for kids.
Yeah.
So if you want to do something gritty for adults, but adapt Treasure Island, you're kind of missing the point because that's not the audience.
Right. You're saying that there's enough in this story that you actually can skew it tonally in a number of different ways.
Yes.
That all work.
Mm-hmm.
That all
That'll have the
ability to work. Yes,
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I get you.
Because I mean, Dickens wasn't writing for kids. He was writing for. I mean, he was writing for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like back in Dickens's time, there wasn't that much of a distinction between stuff for kids and stuff for adults as there is now. It was all like. Essentially, it was like fiction or novels, which were a little bit scandalous, and, good, wholesome texts, which were nonfiction or like poetry.
Yes. So I think this survives anything.
Yes.
And that brings me to point number 2. I found it so freeing in this episode to have already decided that our favorite version of A Christmas Carol is A Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
If we had gone into this saying, well, the best one is the Patrick Stewart one because it's the most faithful and it's the closest to the book and it's not throwing in any weird stuff like Muppets, it would make it really hard to take any other version seriously. But we've already pretty much decided that the most faithful, at least in terms of the spirit of the book, the most faithful happens to be the one with the Muppets. It means that no matter what version you put in front of us, we can look at it and go, well, what do you have to show us? We're ready for you to be great no matter what weird thing you're throwing at us because we know that the Muppet one is the best one.
Yes.
So nothing will surprise us anymore. It was very freeing, I felt.
All right. Should we are just to give like a little peek behind the curtain here, just for kind of, our 30 seconds of fun personal
Our
stuff.
30 seconds of 12-minute banter.
We're back to our roots here. It is actually interesting that we are reprising an episode from our very, very first season or series because we have not recorded in the middle of the afternoon on a weekend in many a day.
Mm-hmm.
We used to always record on weekend afternoons, Sunday afternoons in particular. Then we had a baby, but he's being cared for by other people right now. He's not in our house, which is great for him and great for us. And we're going to take this precious time away from our sweet child that we love so much to bring you A Christmas Carol Part 2.
Shall we?
Yes.
Like I said at the beginning, there's a million different versions. The way I kind of look at this batch of 9 is there was nothing in particular that drove the decision to do these 9 in particular, other than they looked interesting and it seemed like it would be a fun mix.
Yeah, like a good assortment.
Right. Because I know back in episode number 6, I said, hey, let's definitely do this again next year. Now, though, I mean it. I kind of would like to keep revisiting A Christmas Carol every year because we'll never run out.
It's going to be like, we've had a couple of projects that I am comfortable saying we are the only people that have ever attempted this.
Yeah.
Like Les Mis was one.
Les Mis was big.
Les Mis was big because it was extensive.
And if we're not the only people, it's a small club.
Yeah. I kind of think if we do this for 2 or 3 years and at the end of that time we say we have watched every version of A Christmas Carol that is available to us and like in the English language, I think that will be a good accomplishment to be able to tell our grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that. I like taking things on.
Our likely Jewish grandchildren.
Our sweet little Jewish grandchildren.
Well, I mean, actually, I think that's starting a big theme that we're going to see throughout this episode is that this this story's been brought to the screen by Jews many times.
Many times. There's a grand tradition. And I guess another theme that maybe, if you're just now tuning into this show, we've brought up a number of times. If you listen to episode 1, I think we brought it up there. We don't understand Christmas very well. So that makes us either the perfect people to bring you this content or the absolute worst.
Well, I think that brings up something really big because I think one of the things we're going to crack by the end of it, not only are we going to crack Christmas and A Christmas Carol again, but I think we're going to crack what A Christmas Carol is about.
Yeah.
Because I think we have different ideas of what it is. I think that's one of the things we found by the end of this is that we were looking for different things. Because there's one in particular that like really did it for me that didn't do it for you at all.
We'll come to that organically, I think. All right. We've beat around the bush. It is literally for the first time this year snowing outside as we record this episode. It's kind of nice. And I think we should just dive right in.
Okay. So we're going back earlier than we ever did before. We're going back to 1935 with the movie Scrooge, British film directed by Henry Edwards, written by H. Fowler Mere, starring Sir Seymour Hicks as Ebenezer Scrooge. This is worth noting for the reason that this was not his first time playing Scrooge. He'd been playing Scrooge for decades.
Well, that explains why he's so old.
He's very old playing this character.
I've never seen an older Scrooge, I don't think.
Nope. He began playing Scrooge in 1901 on the stage.
Jesus.
And then he was in a 1913 silent version.
Okay. And this is now 1935.
Yeah, so this was big. He's a get. Is what I'm saying. He's definitely a get.
Well, like much like Patrick Stewart. Like he'd been performing this for years. For years. And someone was like, let's make a movie. And he was like, yeah.
I had high hopes for this one because it was one of those classic ones. It's fine.
Yeah.
It was okay.
I mean, it had a number of things in it that I found very interesting. Again, as I say, first of all, a very old Scrooge, which was kind of fascinating that you get to the end of your life and there's still room for redemption.
Yeah.
As opposed to, a 50-year-old Scrooge that has however many more years to go. Just watching it stylistically, I think was interesting because despite the fact that this movie was 1935.
It is the first sound version of Scrooge, by the way.
Yeah. And, in 4 years, we'd have Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz. Like movie making was just about to hit that sort of peak. This is very much harkens back to the silent era in its style. It's very much about like background music telling a story. There were a lot of like tableaus that didn't have anybody speaking, but were just kind of setting the scene.
Like not every version of Christmas Carol has like a montage of what London was like at the time.
Yeah.
But this one showed us tons of stuff.
Yeah.
And easily could have been in a silent movie.
Yeah.
Like there's no dialogue at all.
Yeah.
Another thing that I liked about it in terms of this like coming from the silent era, it actually felt a lot like German expressionism.
A little bit.
Like,
there was a lot of shadow.
Yeah, the way it's shot was not the way a lot of like English language stuff was shot, but a lot of the way like German stuff was shot.
Yeah.
We watched Nosferatu for the show. That was so much fun.
Yeah. I mean, I guess all I would really say about it, I didn't take a ton of notes on this one. I feel like sometimes it's hard to take notes on. We talked about this with that really old Treasure Island that we watched too, that sometimes it's hard. I know we've seen a bunch 4 years ago of Christmas carols, but it's hard for these really old ones that are just like a perfectly reasonable telling of the story that you don't have a lot to compare it to because we watched them chronologically. So I didn't have a lot to take down. It was fine. It was definitely interesting to see one that was this old, like older than the Alastair Sim one, which up to now had been, I think, probably one of the older ones that I had seen. Mm-hmm. It is the only Christmas carol that I had seen up to this point that addresses one of the big problems I've always had with the actual dramaturgy of the plot, which is how would the poulterer's shop possibly be open at 7:00 in the morning on Christmas Day for the young boy to go and buy the prize turkey that's still sitting in the window?
Don't ever change. I
like
love
it
you.
wouldn't be open, and that has always bothered me. And this one had an extended sequence where they had to go and like wake up the guy and like drag him out of bed and all of this stuff. And I actually really appreciated that someone way back, like, 50 years before I was even born, was like, this bothers me and I'm going to figure this out. So that's kind of all I had to say about this one. Did you have other notes that you wanted to go into?
I have a bunch of notes about it. Let me run through kind of quickly. Is there a particular hair requirement of working at Scrooge and Marley?
Because the hair was very strange.
Scrooge and Bob both have the exact same hairstyle. Like both of it very, very unkempt, but unkempt in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Like if you told me, no, it's actually a hat that you get when you start working there, I would have believed you. I do think Seymour Hicks was maybe almost too old to play the part.
Well, he was so old that like when they go back to young Scrooge was not that young.
Well, he also, this is not a thing we see very often.
Yeah.
He played young Scrooge.
Right. Again, not that young.
Yeah, it's just him with like darker hair, but a very, very old man. Here's two things that didn't work for me. The Ghost of Christmas Past only takes him to one time. There's one flashback.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So there's no...
We don't see him as a boy.
There's nothing of him as a boy, which would have been great if it was the same actor playing him as like a 10-year-old. We don't see his sister. We don't see Fezziwig. We see him at work, and this woman comes in who is his fiance.
Yeah.
And she leaves him.
Yeah.
And it's a very extended scene, but it's just one scene.
Yeah.
And then we immediately are back in the present, and then he meets the Ghost of Christmas Present, which didn't work for me. I need my Scrooge to go on a journey.
Yeah, he didn't go on much of a journey. And as I recall, that one scene, he was already there. He's like, oh, I'm really sorry. I did a bad, like, he didn't.
Was it that one that
I
did
think
that?
it was that one, yeah.
There are a couple that we watched that did that.
They turn around pretty quick.
One other thing that I think we should mention, what do the ghosts look like in this one? What do the spirits look like?
One of them looked like nothing, as I recall.
They kind of all look like nothing because you don't see any of them.
Yeah.
Like Marley, you see him for a second when you see his face on the door knocker, but then when he's inside, you don't see him at all.
Yeah.
Apparently, the voice of Marley was Claude Rains, which is
fun fact.
Super fun. But yeah, the Ghost of Christmas Past is just like a light. Ghost of Christmas Present was nothing from what I recall. And then Christmas Yet to Come was also just like a shadow.
Yeah.
Which...
They didn't have the effects budget in 1935 for some of these things.
We do see the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Yeah.
No, we do see that ghost. So it's that one ghost is seen and the other ones aren't.
Right.
I don't understand.
Well, the Ghost of Christmas Present is just a guy.
Then he goes on his journey and he comes out the other side very happy because they did it. The spirits, they did it all in one night,
et cetera, et
cetera. Et cetera, et cetera. We get so much time with how he got the turkey from the poulterer. I would argue it's not the most important thing in the world, but I'm glad it would.
Too much time.
Yeah, I would. I'm glad you found it satisfying. I think they spent a lot of time on it.
I just think like it's so fascinating when things are universal and persist through the ages. And you know that one thing that always delights me is when some writer clearly had either the same delight or the same problem that I had with some element of the story and really wanted to explore it.
Okay, can you help me with this note?
Yeah.
I just wrote, don't do that. I know what it was about, but I don't remember who he was doing it to. I remember that
he touched someone inappropriately?
He tickled someone's chin.
Yeah.
Was it Mrs. Cratchit?
No,
or was
it was
it
a child.
Fred's? No, it was
Fred's wife.
It was an
Fred's
adult
wife.
woman.
Yeah, no, it was Fred's wife.
It was when he goes to see Fred.
Yeah. he's a little handsy with his wife.
He like tickles her under the chin because he's being all cute and like impish.
Yeah.
And she finds it kind of funny. I hated it and wish she wouldn't do that. And then there's this scene where he goes off. He's suddenly at the party and he's with Fred and he says, would you let an old man in? I can't remember what the line was, but he comes inside and then he just kind of drifts off into the corner and looks at the Christmas tree and starts to like cry.
Yeah.
And then Fred comes up behind him and I just want to say like, are you okay? Because you came in acting super weird, unlike anything I've ever seen. Then you wandered off into the corner and just started crying while we were all talking to you.
We were all making merry.
It's just are you okay, like mentally?
Just crying in the corner of a Christmas party is such a mood.
Like less than 2 minutes after he's walked in the door. Like imagine your grandpa walks into the party, who's been a dick his whole life. He tickles your mom's chin and then walks into the corner and starts crying. Then he goes to the Cratchits. You know what? Looking back on it,
Amazing.
No, this one wasn't fine. I didn't think this one was very good at all.
All right, fair enough.
Kind of bummed me out.
Fair enough.
Should we move on?
All right. This jump always fascinates me because this has happened before, that we've had a movie from the early to mid 30s contrasted with a movie with the same source material from just a few years later.
3 years.
And it always shocks me what advancements were made in the craft of movie making in like the second half of that decade. It's like I'm no film historian, but it's fascinating because we go from 1935, this weird, strange, quasi-German expressionist, quasi-silent film, to fucking Joe Mankiewicz in 1938. And for those of you that are patrons, you will know that we actually just recorded a commentary track for Joe Mankiewicz's, some would argue, his magnum opus, All About Eve, from 1950. So we've just spent a lot of time talking about Joe Mankiewicz, and here we are again with Reginald Owen in A Christmas Carol from 1938.
So Mankiewicz produced this one. We can assume he had a large hand in it. It was directed by Edwin L. Marin. It was written by Hugo Butler, and as you say, Reginald Owen is Ebenezer Scrooge. If you don't remember who he is, but the name sounds familiar. He's Admiral Boom from Mary Poppins.
Yeah. Old then, old now.
Well, so best as I can tell, he was not originally supposed to be the star in this. Originally, this was supposed to be Lionel Barrymore, but then he had to drop out for health reasons. So then Reginald Owen was cast.
Because he was old.
I don't know when that well, that's the thing. He wasn't old.
Yeah.
Well, who? Because
Lionel Barrymore was old.
Yes. Reginald Owen was not old. He was like 50.
Yeah.
To me, there is an elephant in the room with this one.
Yeah.
Because I actually thought this one was really fun and we enjoyed it. And it's just a fun, it's like 69 minutes long.
Yeah.
Like it is not a
fun
long
romp.
thing to sleep. It is a fun version of A Christmas Carol. The elephant in the room for me is that Reginald Owen's old age makeup looks terrible. And he looks like old Biff from Back to the Future 2. Because it's not just the really weird old age makeup, it's also the way he's hunched over the entire time.
Yeah.
Like he's clearly a young man pretending to be old.
There's an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. I can't remember the title, but the plot is that this old admiral comes on the ship and then he starts like aging backwards, and he it turns out like he's actually being played by a young actor, like a young man in his 20s or 30s.
That, yeah.
But so the age makeup goes through about 6 or 7 different stages. Like when he comes on board, he's like the oldest man you've ever seen. And he goes all the way back to like the actor's actual face. But that age makeup is like famously terrible, like famously bad. And that's what I always think of whenever I see bad old age makeup, and this was not great.
They made one particular choice that I thought made the whole thing. You know, sometimes there's something that like brings an outfit together.
Yeah.
What do you call it when one thing makes the whole thing fall apart?
I don't know.
They decided, so they put him in a bald cap with a wig.
Yeah.
So he's got the thing where he's got like the band of white hair going around the back of his head.
Sure.
With the bald head.
Yeah.
But then they gave him like the one tuft of hair right in the middle of his bald cap.
Yeah.
That literally, if they had just gotten rid of the one little tuft of hair, I think all the makeup would have worked better for me.
It was probably there to like hide the seam.
It didn't look like it was hiding anything.
Yeah.
It just looked unnecessary. Anyway, that to me is the thing. It's the worst part of this movie. The makeup doesn't work.
Yeah. I will say again, if we're sort of dinging people on their appearance and perhaps like
you want to talk about the
casting
Lockharts?
choices. Yeah, I mean, they're great. It's a married couple playing Bob and Mrs. Cratchit with their own daughter playing one of the Cratchit girls, which is great.
Their own daughter, who is June Lockhart from Lost in Space.
There you go.
It's Jean and Kathleen Lockhart as Bob and Mrs. Cratchit.
Right.
And their daughter, June, in her screen debut.
Yeah.
Which is really fun.
It is fun.
And they're very cute.
They're very cute.
Nothing more need be said about them.
It's the portliest Bob Cratchit I've ever seen. He's a well-fed man, well-dressed, looks great. But, I have a hard time believing that the Cratchits don't have enough to eat unless he's taking from the children.
I feel like they made a couple of mistakes in this one, I would say. And one of them is the Cratchits. Not just the fact that Bob's a little well-fed, which is textually not accurate at all, but they are comfortably middle class.
Their home is beautiful. It's very like middle class Victorian. They've got lots of like little things on display, lots of knickknacks like under glass domes, which was super popular. It's definitely like a middle class or, tradesman's class home. It's not a hovel. And you were the one that pointed out that like the Patrick Stewart one that they made Richard E. Grant just look like disgusting.
Yeah.
And
I thought they went like 5% too far.
they may have done. I think he's great. But it's definitely like a range of Cratchit households that we see. These Cratchits are doing very well.
Well, they're not doing that well because this is one of the ones where Bob Cratchit gets fired.
I don't think I've ever seen this in any other version.
Yeah,
and
fair.
I know I'll say that a lot, but I really don't think there's any other one where he's actually like sacked and he's trying to hide it from the family until Christmas is over.
Yeah.
And we've seen a couple that they do a couple of weird things with his employment status, but this one he is actively fired when he goes home for Christmas on Christmas Eve.
Because he's going home for Christmas and he starts playing with these kids.
Yeah.
He's throwing snowballs with them. And they say, like, next guy that walks around the corner, I'm going to knock his top hat right off. The guy walks around the corner, he knocks his top hat off. What's the problem?
It's Scrooge.
It's Scrooge's top hat.
Yeah.
And Scrooge fires him on the spot and then says, if I remember correctly, I paid you extra for tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh,
and
there's a lot of business.
And you ruined my hat, and I paid you this much, and my hat cost this much, so best as I figure it, you owe me a shilling.
But then
and
he's then you have to give notice, but I'm going to take that money away from you. There's some business.
All I remember is that the thing I came away from it is that this guy basically yelled at him and said, "You're fired. Give me $1."
Yeah.
Just kicking him when he's down. But he fires him. He fires Bob. And so that's Bob's big thing the rest of the movie is that he's not going to share this with anybody.
Yeah.
Finally tells people that it happened.
He
but
confides in his oldest daughter, which I
Yeah.
actually think is very sweet, that he's like, I don't want to burden your mother with this, but I just need to tell someone.
But then Scrooge shows up
Yeah.
and he's like, "You're rehired." And everyone's like, "You were fired?"
Yay.
That doesn't matter at that point. So that wasn't great. This Scrooge did a thing that I don't often see, where he's like, I want to say it was after. I might be getting the timing mixed up a little bit, but I want to say it was after the Ghost of Christmas Present, where he's like, "Is that all you're going to show me? Aren't you going to show me more? Are you going to show me anything else?" It's like this Scrooge is I demand to go on a bit of a journey.
I got to go on a journey.
And I refuse to go through this if you're not going to put me on a bit of a journey.
Yeah.
And that's not a Scrooge I see very much. We only see him as a kid in the past, which is it's not great.
Yeah.
Why did I write all these guys are going to end up boning? The milk of human kindness. Okay, so when he meets the Ghost of Christmas Present, they're standing in a doorway, obviously invisible to everybody.
Oh, yeah, this was great.
And what the Ghost of Christmas Present is doing is he's a big cup. And what keeps happening is guys like bump into each other in front of him and they go like, "Yeah, I'm going to knock your block off," that kind of thing. And he like shakes the cup at them. And then they go, "What are we fighting for? It's Christmas.
Let's have a drink."
He does it all the time. But like, I think what he's creating is a romance within these men. I think they are going back to bone. That's what I'm saying. Like, I understand it's subtext. I understand it's not text, but to me it is clear.
Yeah. I wrote down Love This Young Scrooge. Was I talking about the boy Scrooge? I don't really remember.
You must have been.
I must have been.
The thing that surprised me was that Reginald Owen didn't at any point play a young Scrooge because he's clearly in old age makeup. So I don't know why they didn't just use him with no makeup on.
I don't
know. I don't. I feel like that is a missed opportunity.
Perhaps. I will say too. We found out some really fun information about the little boy that plays Tiny Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Because he sprung to my notice.
So it's Terry Kilburn.
Terry Kilburn. He sprung to my notice because, first of all, I thought his acting was very good. He was a little bit tall for Tiny Tim. It was a bit of a struggle for Bob to kind of hoist him up on his shoulder there.
It wasn't great. Bob himself kind of short and stout.
Yeah. A little short, stout Bob. Tiny Tim fully the same height as Bob. But I did think his acting was extremely good. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of him because there's that little scene at the beginning with him and like Fred and his brother, and you learn all about the Cratchits and you get a lot of backstory there. And I have this thing sometimes when we watch old movies that I think about the fact that everybody in this movie is dead, and it depresses me. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I like to look up people that might conceivably still be alive, like people that played children in a movie from 1938. And he did die, but recently, right? Like fairly recently we discovered. But it was so exciting because I was like, what did this guy go on to do? And it turned out he went back to his like hometown of Michigan, and he founded a theater, or he was like the president of this community
Wasn't he
theater.
The artistic director?
The artistic director of the Meadowbrook Regional Theater for like 30 years. And I'm familiar with that theater. Like his last year there was like 1994. Mm-hmm. And I think I said to you, like, I think I auditioned for a show there in 1994. Like we may have crossed paths.
As like a theatrical child in Michigan.
Yeah. Like we may have crossed paths, like however briefly, which I just thought was fascinating. But he was married to his husband for like, I don't know, however many decades.
I think it was like 50 years or something.
Yeah, 50 years, but he just died like recently, like in the last couple years. That was a little trip down, not memory lane, a little trip down Wikipedia lane.
Mm-hmm. My big takeaway from this one is like, okay, as an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, I have a lot of issues with it. I think it doesn't go as far as it needs to. I don't think his arc is very good. As just an entertaining movie, Joe Mankiewicz produced an entertaining movie.
Oh, Joe Mankiewicz can tell a story.
Yeah, like this is fun.
Yeah.
It's a really fun way to spend 70 minutes, you know? Mm-hmm. I don't really have that many things to say about it negatively as a movie other than the old age makeup isn't that good.
Yeah.
As an adaptation of Christmas Carol, I found it kind of unsatisfying.
That's fair. All right.
Even though it was kind of fun.
All right, should we move on?
We're going to go forward now to 1954. We're going back to one of our old standbys. One of these shows like DuPont Show of the Month or A Shower of Stars, where people were contractually obligated to star in TV movies. A Shower of Stars, Season 1, Episode 4, December 23rd, 1954, was an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. It's about an hour. It's been released like as a movie, like you can get it on VHS and DVD, that kind of thing. Directed by Ralph Levy, written by Maxwell...
A Jew.
Probably. We don't know. I have some proof of other people later. I didn't actually look into Ralph Levy at all. Written by Maxwell Anderson, who is
Not
of note because he wrote the stage adaptation for The Bad Seed in 1954. Stars someone we've talked about before on the show several times, Frederick March.
An old age makeup.
As Ebenezer Scrooge. But he was kind of old at that point.
Yeah.
1954, he was no spring chicken. But can you describe, what did they do for his Ebenezer Scrooge makeup?
Well, I have to take you through my notes
okay.
to give you the full impact of this, because it's sort of a journey. I wrote down, heck of an opening. I don't actually remember what the opening was, but it must have been...
It's kind of a musical.
Yeah.
Like, remember, there was a ton of music throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
This was our first musical of like
many.
4 in this episode.
Yeah, I just wrote, I did not know this was a musical.
Yeah.
So I wrote, heck of an opening.
Mm-hmm.
Heck of a nose. Is this anti-Semitic?
That's your reading of it. It is a heck of a nose, though.
I just wanted to take you on that nose journey with me.
He's got a giant nose.
Yeah.
A huge, huge hook nose, which I didn't know this. Did you know that the nose is something that develops when you get older? That you could be a young man with a cute little button nose. But then when you're an old man, you have a gigantic 4-inch long hook nose.
Well,
because the guy who plays young Scrooge, there's no way that this young man could have turned into this old man. Physically, there's no way it could have happened.
It's the equivalent of like he grew 6 inches or something. Like,
yeah.
It's not a transformation that's possible to make.
Right. Here's the thing about Frederick March. I thought he was actually very good.
It's a role of a lifetime.
he threw himself into it and he acts the hell out of it.
That's right.
It is not his fault that this is a TV production in 1954.
I will say, like, we have watched things with Frederick March in the past that my reaction was he's too beautiful to play this role. That was not my response to his performance as Scrooge in this television movie.
No. I will say this, no one is even trying to do a British accent.
Oh, God, no.
Throughout the entire thing at all. He sounds kind of like prim and proper, but no
it's
one
sort
is...
of the Mid-Atlantic thing.
Yeah, no one is British.
Yeah.
Ghost of Christmas Present. No, because the Ghost of Christmas Past is like, she's very pretty. Ghost of Christmas Present, they do a thing in this one where, which we ended up seeing multiple times, where the ghost is also played by someone who plays another character. So in this one, the same actor who plays Fred, his nephew, also plays the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Right, and he's very jolly.
And he gets a fucking banger of a song.
Oh, so, it was just a shock to me that this was a musical. It was kind of amazing that they did the story of A Christmas Carol and it was a musical and the whole thing was only an hour long. Because he gets quite the song.
They cut a lot out of it. His
They
song
sure
goes
did.
on for a long
So
time.
long. And this guy was a legit musical theater guy because you pointed out to me he was in 1776,
Yeah.
like the original production in the movie of 1776, which is a show that I love.
But it's like he's a Ghost of Christmas Present, the likes of which we've never seen because he's tall and handsome.
Oh, yeah.
And barrel chest, like no beard, no cloak.
Good looking guy.
Just a guy in a unitard with laurels, like
Singing.
with wreaths around him, that kind of thing. And he gets a heck of a song, and he and Scrooge are dancing through Scrooge's apartment. I actually wondered if the entire Ghost of Christmas Present scene was just going to be in Scrooge's apartment with this dance number.
I will say, like, of all the musicals we saw, I think this tune and lyrics of this one stuck with me the least because I remember him doing the song.
Yeah.
I don't really remember what the song was.
I
just remember
just,
it
like,
was
one
very
line
repetitive.
over and
Yeah,
over again.
it was very repetitive.
I'm just thinking about all the different songs that we get in it. Like, young Scrooge and his girlfriend get a big song that has nothing to do with Christmas or A Christmas Carol.
It's just a song.
They're like performing the song at a party.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
literally the song
like
has nothing to do with anything.
Like on a staircase, and it's just about like, I love you, and what did you get me for Christmas?
That's it.
Yeah.
But then Tim gets a big song at the end. I believe that's like the big finish is Tim gets a big song.
Yeah.
Tim is just he's this wee little boy with a very high voice and he just sings quite a long song and Scrooge just looks at him. Wait, is this the one, from what I remember, this is the one where Scrooge has a moment at the end where he is remembering all of the things that happen over the course of the movie. And he's remembering it all and reacting to all of it in real time.
Yeah.
But he's at the table while other people are like trying to talk to him.
It's just like of an hour-long movie. It's fully 5 minutes of Frederick March just making facial expressions to nothing.
Like, oh, I'm sad to remember that thing. Oh, but I'm happy to remember that thing. Oh, and I'm mad to remember that thing. But he's having all of these reactions in silence in front of, just at the table. Like, I almost wish he did just wander off into the corner to cry in front of a Christmas tree because that somehow would be less weird and less concerning.
It's so good.
What do you think?
It's fun.
What's your pronouncement?
It's fun.
It's fun.
It's fun. I mean, apparently I'm a sucker for a Christmas Carol musical.
Well, we've got more.
We've got more. All right. We're going right into another one.
1962.
All right. I don't know how long we're going to spend on this one.
We might spend the rest of the episode because I have questions.
I kind of made Jeremy throw this in at the last minute because I was like, oh, if we're just doing random Christmas carols, we're watching this. And you were like, I guess. It's Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol.
It was a 1962 TV special directed by Abe Levitow.
Jew.
He's got some bona fides. He worked with Chuck Jones for a really long time. Did you ever see the Phantom Tollbooth movie? Like the old animated
I'm sure
Phantom
that
Tollbooth?
I did.
It was really good. He co-directed it with Chuck Jones,
good for him.
which is not nothing. Written by Barbara Chain, produced by Lee Orgel and Henry G. Saperstein.
Jew.
Composed by Walter Scharf. All the music was composed by Walter Scharf.
And Julie Stein.
I had to, yeah.
Julie Stein, a Jew, a British Jew.
I had to write down from Walter Scharf's bio. Born in Manhattan, he was the son of Yiddish theater comic Bessie Zverling.
And Julie,
so like super
Julie
Jewish.
Stein was a London, like a London Jewish theater guy. Like he's legit musical theater. I think it's Julie Stein, not Jewel Stein. I think is how I've heard it pronounced in the past. It's Jule.
Yeah, I'm confused. This one confuses me.
Here was what I posited. That you didn't think that this was correct just from what you learned about sort of the genesis of this project.
Yeah.
But here was what I posited. Somebody had written an hour-long script for a short animated Christmas Carol with songs. right? Someone was like, hey, we got Julie Stein. We got like 4 or 5 real good songs. We're going to make an animated Christmas Carol. Someone else had this idea for a Mr. Magoo Christmas special. And some third party, perhaps the person in charge, said, let's just take these 2 things. We already have the script. We don't have a script for the Mr. Magoo thing. Let's just make this script that we already have that's just a straight Christmas Carol. We'll just cast it with Mr. Magoo, just like we cast a Christmas Carol with Muppets. And it'll be great. It'll be 2 great tastes that taste great together.
If that were true,
Yeah.
I would buy it.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that it is not true.
Yes.
My understanding is that this was envisioned from day one as a Mr. Magoo special, because this was part of a bigger project. That what they wanted to do was do a TV show where they retold classic stories, all starring Mr. Magoo as the main character.
Right.
And apparently they did a little bit, but then had to cancel it because they couldn't keep up with it. Like, it was the production schedule was too long for a TV show.
Right.
So best as I can tell, this was envisioned from day one as Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
So what is the framework of the story?
I just want to, for a moment,
Yeah.
just pause to reflect that some of our younger listeners may not be familiar with the character of Mr. Magoo.
I forget about that sometimes. I'm not even that familiar with him. Like, it's not like I grew up on Mr. Magoo, but like we knew who he was.
So Mr. Magoo is an animated character. He is a humanoid man.
Well, he's a human man.
He's a human man that lives in our world. And the folly of Mr. Magoo is that he cannot see very well. And so hijinks ensue.
Lots of hijinks all the time.
All related back to the fact that he either mistakes something for something else because he cannot see very well,
right,
or falls down a hole because he cannot see very well,
or something,
or some other, again, jinx and japes. So with that in mind, we watched this hour 15 minutes,
like
hour 15 minutes special. Was any of the plot or any of the jokes, again, Mr. Magoo does one thing: he can't see. That's the only thing that Mr. Magoo does that makes him a comic character. Was there any relationship in this to the fact that Mr. Magoo can't see very well?
Well, you're asking the big question that I want to ask.
Yeah.
But before that, I do want to talk about how this is presented.
Okay.
Because there is a framing device.
There's a framing device. Okay, talk about the framing device.
The framing device is that we are watching a Broadway production of A Christmas Carol starring Mr. Magoo.
In the universe of this.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the movie starts in New York City, and we get a big song. It's great to be back on Broadway.
Yeah.
Sung by Mr. Magoo.
Yes.
And there's some Mr. Magoo hijinks. He thinks he's going into the theater side door, but it's like a restaurant, and we hear him banging through the restaurant, and all kinds of chaos is happening, and he comes out, but he has no idea that it happened because he's Mr. Magoo, and that's the one joke.
Yeah. And he makes it to the stage door.
Yeah, makes it to the stage door.
He's
they
late.
get him in costume.
The thing that horrified me most of all is they say to him, Mr. Magoo, we've been holding the curtain for half an hour.
Yeah.
And I was like, half an hour? Anyway, go ahead.
So then we get to see the production, and it's the kind of thing where, yeah, the idea is that it's a stage production, but once it starts going, like, it's not a stage production anymore.
We're immersed in the story.
Like, there's ghosts that walk through walls. There are things
Sure.
that we can never see. So they forget about that part. But because there's commercial breaks and act breaks, we do constantly go back to, like, the curtains opening and closing and the audience and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Once the story of A Christmas Carol is happening,
it's straight legit.
it's just a Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And, like, Magoo just plays Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I can't believe I'm saying this. Mr. Magoo plays Ebenezer Scrooge fairly well.
That's great.
Like, he does a good job playing Ebenezer Scrooge.
Because the character of Mr. Magoo, oh, and he's grumpy. That's the other thing about Mr. Magoo that you should know. He's a grumpy character.
Is he grumpy?
He's
I always thought he was
grumpy.
pretty positive.
Yeah, because he's always like, you get out of my way, but he's talking to like a tree, you know?
Yeah, okay.
It does lend itself well to the character of Scrooge to cast Mr. Magoo in the role.
Here's my question. Who is this designed to please? Because if it's designed to please fans of A Christmas Carol who aren't fans of Mr. Magoo, I would think they would be very dissatisfied because it's an okay version of A Christmas Carol with a bunch of questionable songs.
Yeah.
And a lead actor who is Mr. Magoo. So I don't think it's pleasing them. If it's designed to please fans of Mr. Magoo, I don't see how it's pleasing them either. Because there is a lack of hijinks in this that is staggering.
He doesn't walk into a single hole. He doesn't yell at a single tree. He doesn't step on a single rake and have it hit him in the face. Like, no jokes and japes.
He's just Scrooge.
Yeah.
And so by the end, we were like, kind of weirdly.
I've never
been so dissatisfied by a pretty good version of A Christmas Carol. Like, by all accounts, it was a pretty good version of A Christmas Carol. But I was so mad because it didn't need to be. I don't understand the point of why it is.
You were really mad. You were really mad at the end. You were like, what the fuck did we just watch? And I'm sitting there going, but Julie Stein wrote the music.
The music is occasionally okay.
Yeah.
It is occasionally not at all. I'm looking through, like, I wrote down all the names of the songs, and it's like, it's a whole bunch of nothing.
Yeah.
It's the kind of stuff you would, but not bad nothing.
No,
just kind of
it's
like,
just like, we sang a Christmas song that was kind of what Julie Stein might imagine Christian families sing on Christmas, which was sort of blessing-y, Christmassy song about the Lord's blessing on our Christmas meal.
One good thing, musically, there's a nice little thing they did where Mr. Magoo gets a song called Alone in the World, and he sings it as a young man while he's left alone at school.
Yeah.
But he's also an old man singing to himself.
Yeah.
So they're singing the song together, but then Alone in the World comes back during his whole time where he's going to meet the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. And you know what? Just from a strictly music, I actually remember it. Thematically, it worked.
Do you think
I found it affecting and emotional.
Do you think it influenced the Muppets, where Scrooge does sing along with his younger self?
It might have.
Yeah.
It might have done.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Who's to say? I mean, those the guys who wrote the Muppet Christmas Carol would have sort of been at a prime age when this came out. It might have been influential.
I don't know.
It might have been formative.
This, I don't see the point. I don't see why this is a thing. If anybody likes it, cool. I feel so weird saying this. It's good and should never have been made.
Yeah. All right.
Not this way.
Not like this.
So that's musical number 2.
We're moving on to the next one.
Musical number 3. 1970, Scrooge, the musical. Do you remember what the tagline was?
No.
What the dickens have they done to Scrooge?
Amazing.
I think they were trying to capitalize on Oliver. Because when was Oliver? Oliver's like 68. Yeah.
It is very Oliver-esque. In fact, I got confused between Leslie Bricusse and Lionel Bart, and I was like, oh my God, it's the same person that wrote Oliver. It's not, but it is the same person that wrote Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah. Leslie was it Bricusse?
Bricusse?
I think so. Did Dr. Dolittle, did all the music for that, did all the music for Willy Wonka, wrote Goldfinger, among many, many other things.
Just died like 2 months ago.
Yeah,
like
kind of
very
crazy.
Recently. Yeah,
directed by Ronald Neame, who did The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie and The Poseidon Adventure.
It's legit is what you're saying.
So
starring Albert Finney.
I'd always kind of heard about this one.
I didn't remember that I had seen it until we started watching it, and then immediately I was like, oh, I've seen this. Yeah. No, absolutely, I have seen this.
So it's a full-length, big movie, widescreen Technicolor musical of The Story of a Christmas Carol, starring Albert Finney as Ebenezer Scrooge and Alec Guinness as Jacob Marley. And boy, it was so good.
What a fucking delight. What a fucking goddamn delight this movie was.
I loved it so much. I loved it from beginning to end.
It's a full musical. It's not just like a movie that has a couple of songs. It is a full storytelling, dancing in the streets, definitely influenced by Oliver musical.
They pulled out all the stops.
Lots
this is
of
a
orphans,
big movie musical.
Lots of urchins. The song at the end where called "Thank You Very Much" is definitely, like, if you've seen Oliver, you know the song "Consider Yourself," where the whole neighborhood, like, the song ends with everyone just like dancing down the street, singing, dancing. That's what this number is. It is this huge number. Albert Finney, a very unusual Scrooge. He loves playing characters with a completely bizarre physicality because his Poirot was also amazing but ridiculous. And this Scrooge is one of the least serious Scrooges that we've seen.
The character doesn't know he's not serious.
The character doesn't know he's not serious, but he's sort of grotesque. Like his shoulders are basically up around his ears the whole time. Like his head is basically coming out of the middle of his chest.
And it's him in old age makeup, which is important.
Yeah, because when they go back to him as a youth, he plays himself. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize how young he was when they made this. It's kind of amazing that the old age makeup is so good, because I wouldn't have thought he was. Didn't you get depressed because you found out he was like 38?
No, that was Bill Murray in Scrooge, which we're gonna talk about. It does depress me that Bill Murray is the same age that I am now when he made Scrooge.
Yeah.
That does depress me. No, Albert Finney was not 38 when he made this.
How old was he?
34.
Oh my God. God damn it. So that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. He did an amazing job considering he was 34 because he looks like he's 90.
Yeah.
But he's also, I think that's what gives him the sort of lightness and levity, because he does become very spry.
Just to skip to the end, when he's happy Scrooge, he he dresses up like Santa Claus, dancing through the streets with all of London, showing up at the Cratchit's door. He is
the cutest Scrooge.
He's adorable. And it's great because they don't recognize him for the longest time. And he does the little, remember when George Clooney pulls his beard down in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Sure.
So that Holly Hunter can see his face?
Yeah.
Like Scrooge does the same thing where he pulls his beard down and they go, ah!
Yeah.
He's
but
delightful.
Also the scene where he thinks that, the premise being, he has died. This is the Ghost of Christmas Future. And the whole town is gathered with this one representative who was the hot broth seller at the beginning that Scrooge stole his broth.
Well, I want to get back to that too, but can I talk about the hot broth seller really quickly?
Sure.
Okay. So this does a thing that I love at the beginning, because what does Scrooge do? What is his job?
He lends money.
Okay. How many versions do we ever see him doing his job other than just sitting at a desk?
Damn few.
Okay. He does his job in this one. There's a whole scene at the beginning where he gets a whole song called I Hate People, which is an amazing song, where he's going around collecting rent from all of the people who owe him money.
Yeah.
And no one can pay, and he's giving all of these extensions, and he hates doing it.
And he's taking things from all of them, I'll take your wares then, in lieu. I'll take this hot broth or whatever.
And it's incredible because we actually get to see what the community thinks of him.
Yeah.
Everyone fucking hates him so much because he's a piece of shit. He's a terrible person, and he makes their Christmas terrible. But one of them is the hot broth seller.
Hot broth seller.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end, we see the hot broth seller again. He's this great actor, and he's giving this big speech in front of the whole neighborhood about what a great thing Scrooge has done for him, and he's so happy. And what we, the audience, know, this is called dramatic irony. What we, the audience, know that Scrooge does not know is that what he's saying is, I'm so glad that you have died and relieved me of my debt to you. And everybody in the neighborhood feels the same. They're so happy, and they're all cheering for him. And Scrooge gets up. Of course, he can't be seen by them because he's with the Ghost of Christmas Future. And he starts making this speech about how happy he is and
how proud he is.
And what a kind heart. And as he's making the speech, they're literally carrying the coffin out of the door behind him. And what was my reaction?
I couldn't tell if you were horrified or you thought it was hilarious. We were both
kind of both
shocked. It was
the funniest thing I've ever seen. So I don't want to say that Albert Finney's performance carries this movie, because that would be giving short shrift to all the other wonderful performers and songs and all of the work that everyone who was involved in this movie did. But I feel like without him being so funny, he's one of the funniest unintentionally. Well, Albert Finney is intentionally being funny.
Yes.
Scrooge is not intentionally being funny.
Right.
Without him being as funny as he is, I don't think this movie would work, which puts it in quite a contrast with Michael Caine, because what we talked about when we did the Muppets is that Michael Caine was like, okay, Muppets are funny. I'm going to be the straight man.
Right.
And not wink at the audience and not do all these funny things. So it's a completely different performance. It almost reminds me of that Playing Shakespeare thing where he gets Patrick Stewart and David Suchet, who both did the same role of Shylock in The Merchant of Venice, but played it completely differently to show.
Can you just remind everyone what Playing Shakespeare is really quickly?
Playing Shakespeare is an amazing series from the early 80s. It's an 8-part series where John Barton, this old dude who also just recently died
Mhm.
gets like this whole group of actors from the RSC together and does these like master classes on Shakespeare.
Right.
And it's amazing, and everyone's in it. Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Roger Rees, Judi Dench, like all these unbelievable actors that he has. It's just like the prime of the RSC from like the early 80s.
But
so
it's like
anyway,
everyone before they did all the stuff you know them
yeah,
from.
It's when they were Shakespearean actors. So there's this one episode where it's basically called like Discovering the Character or something like that. And he's like, listen, I've directed 2 productions of Merchant of Venice, one with Patrick Stewart, one with David Suchet. I was the director for both of them, but the performances were completely different. They played it almost opposite. And I want to give you some examples of how that can work, how you can take the same character and interpret it almost totally differently. He has both actors give the same speeches the way that they did them, and it's totally different, but both of them work. And that's kind of how I feel. That's the level of I just want to point out that is the level of comparison that I am talking about when I'm talking about Albert Finney and Michael Caine in their performances of Scrooge. They have taken an almost opposite interpretation, but because so great is their talent and so great is the production around them, that both of them work beautifully.
I mean, this goes back
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I mean, this goes back to what I was saying before. I'm delighted. This goes back to what I was saying before about how this story can survive anything.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do with A Christmas Carol, it has the capacity to be great. And this one ended up being really great.
It was great.
Even though it ended up being a little weird, too. So there's some weird stuff in it.
There's some weird stuff. It's very weird. It's one of the weirdest versions we've seen.
I'm talking about Alec Guinness.
And we've seen Mr. Magoo. It's one of the weirdest versions we've seen. Mr. Magoo was a straight version. This one was very strange.
Alec Guinness plays Marley. And there's like no special effects in this
just
part.
There, yeah.
He walks into the room as Marley. He's got, as you would expect, he's painted gray. He's got the scarf around his head. He's got chains and he's got boxes. And seeing Alec Guinness in this makes it really funny for me to think of a kind of apocryphal story that I've heard for years, that fans of Star Wars love to tell themselves the story that, oh, Alec Guinness hated Star Wars. He hated working on it. He thought the script was terrible. He didn't take it seriously. There's like interviews where he is just very dismissive of it. But like, oh man, we all know how great it is. But Alec Guinness was a serious actor, right? Like, Alec Guinness was a very popular comedic actor.
Yeah.
Like, he did drama, he did comedy, he did anything.
He's a working actor.
He was a working goddamn actor. He showed up and did his job. Like, that's not really, it is a fanciful way of talking about how he thought of Star Wars. When you look at his entire filmography, Star Wars is like one of many weird things that he did.
Yeah.
So he was a guy who was willing to get weird, and his Marley is very weird.
It's very weird.
Physically, it's like they decided, well, Marley doesn't weigh anything because he's a ghost, but we're not going to suspend you from wires to do that. We just need you to
funny walk.
Just do a funny walk where like you don't. So he's always sashaying everywhere through the movie and doing very weird things with his hands, and he's very big and flowy, and it's very weird and very distracting. He's entertaining.
Yeah. And at the end, I will, I guess, spoil the ending.
No, skip right there.
Scrooge does go to hell
He
in
goes
this version.
to hell.
Like actual like fires, chains, hell.
Well,
He's like I'm literally in hell.
Usually what we see when he meets the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is that he sees that it's a grave and it is his grave. And in this one, just like every other version, like he sees that it's his grave. He finds out that the Tiny Tim is dead. He sees the Cratchits. They're very sad. And in this one, he like falls into the grave
and goes to hell.
And Marley
physically goes to hell.
Marley is there to greet him, and he's welcoming to hell and saying, hey, just so you know, the devil loves you so much. He thinks you were so good when you were on Earth. He's decided to make you his like personal bookkeeper. And all of these we thought they were like big beefy dudes at first, but they're all
a close up.
They're all kind of fat.
I think they were just like assistants on the set. That they were like, hey, we need some more guys. Can we just like oil you up and put you in the movie for a minute?
They look like cartoon executioners. So they've got like, the leather pants, no shirt, and the leather hood on. And they have brought his chains. And so we actually see Scrooge getting the chains that Marley told him he would get. And Marley is laughing at this whole thing.
He's like screaming in distress.
And like, it made me think two things. One, it made me think, what the fuck? This is fucking weird. I don't even know if I'm here for it, but it's weird. That was the first thing I thought.
Yeah.
But the second thing I thought was, this actually brings up something interesting. that I've never seen before and would be really interested to see. I would love to know a little bit more about Marley's part in this, because one thing I've never really fully understood is, why did Marley come to Scrooge?
Yeah.
Like, why did Marley decide to come to Scrooge and say, hey, you're going to be visited by 3 spirits?
Yeah.
What was Marley getting out of it? Did he make a deal or something like that?
So hold that thought.
Yeah.
We're going to loop back to it.
Right. So it planted that seed for me, and I'm glad it did, because it did come back later. But anyway, do you have anything else to say about this one? It was a delight.
Strongly recommend. It was the only one we've watched up to now, even in version 1, that's part of the Criterion Collection.
Yeah.
Which gives you a sense of, the...
Well, it was on the Criterion Channel. I don't know if it's in the Criterion Collection.
Okay, sorry. I didn't know there was a distinction between those two things.
Yeah, they put other stuff on the Criterion Channel.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry. It's not.
All right. It was amazing. I recommend anybody to watch it. So good. That is definitely going on our Christmas movie roster from here on out.
Okay, so we've got 4 more to get through, and then we have 2 from 1988 right now.
Okay.
So first was Scrooged, which I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that Bill Murray was the same age in this movie as I am now. That is weird to me.
I mean, you look great, sweetie. You look great.
No, I appreciate that. It's not so much the looks. It's more like, I want to be clear about this. This was like the first movie Bill Murray had made in 4 years, because Ghostbusters was so big that he didn't need to make anything.
Yeah.
And was like, no, I'm kind of retiring because this is too much. I'll come back to make Scrooge. He was a big star at that point.
Yeah.
38.
Yeah.
Directed by Richard Donner, who also did The Omen, Superman, The Goonies, the Lethal Weapon franchise.
It's a lot of good movies there.
Born Richard Schwartzberg to Maddie Horowitz and Fred Schwartzberg.
Grand tradition.
Written by Michael O'Donoghue and Mitch Glazer. Mitch
Glazer.
Born to Leonard and Zelda Glazer.
God damn it.
They wrote on SNL, so they knew Bill Murray from those days. And the reason this is here is because of something I said at the beginning, which is that it was really freeing to have our favorite version be Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
Because it means we can watch all kinds of different ones. I kind of think this is an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. I think but I mean, I think it should be talked about in the same way. I think look at what we did with Pride and Prejudice, and look at what we did with Emma. We kind of made a distinction between the ones that are told, in the world of the story, and ones that are a modern retelling.
Yes, because the Jane Austen story is so dependent on time and place that to put it in another time and place, you really have to put a lot of thought into it. I think you're right that with A Christmas Carol, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can just set it where you want. The story is the same.
Literally, it's just guy is a dick, learns to not be a dick.
Yeah.
You can put that anywhere. No, sorry, let me be clear about that. Person is a dick.
Yeah.
Learns not to be a dick.
Fair enough.
Happens to be a guy in all the versions we've watched, but isn't a guy in every version. And I think next year, when we do this again, there will be a bunch more that we watch where he's not. This story can survive anything. So Scrooge is all about Frank Cross, who is the president of, IBC or something like that?
A network.
Okay. Bill Murray plays Frank Cross.
Yes.
And he's a mean guy. Oh, he's a dick and an asshole to all kinds of people.
And his secretary, she's very put upon.
Very put upon. Alfre Woodard is very
She's
put upon.
She's got a kid that's not doing good.
No, and he is a jerk to her, and he meets all these people at the beginning, and we find out at the very beginning that the thing that is going on is that his big pet project is this giant live TV event that is going to have pieces broadcast from all across the world, and it is a live retelling of A Christmas Carol starring Buddy Hackett as Ebenezer Scrooge and Mary Lou Retton as Tiny Tim.
Who are both actually in this thing.
Yeah, and Jamie Farr I think Jamie Farr plays Bob Cratchit or something like that. He doesn't have any lines in it.
No.
It's weird. It's weird to me.
It's really weird.
But
and Sir John Houseman is the narrator, whoever that may be.
Jamie Farr gets no lines, but we do see Mary Lou Retton do some flippy dips.
She does a couple flippy dips.
Then, one night, he's visited by his Marley, who was the head of the network before him, who he learned under, his old boss, who's now dead and decaying in front of him, and he tells him, Frank, you're going to be visited by 3 spirits, Ghost of Christmas Past, Ghost of Christmas Present, and Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. It's very clear, I was saying this before about Magoo, is this trying to please fans of A Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
If you are a fan of A Christmas Carol, everything connects.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely have a Bob Cratchit. We kind of have 2 Bob Cratchits. because there's Alfre Woodard as his secretary.
Right.
But then we also have Bobcat Goldthwait as Elliot Loudermilk, the like executive he fires at the very beginning who goes on a fucking journey on this movie getting drunker and drunker.
It's funny because I was just going to say he doesn't really go on a journey. He just wanders the streets of Manhattan getting drunker and more violent.
It's a bit of a journey.
I guess.
He's very straight-laced at the beginning of it, and he's very violent with a gun at the end of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're a fan of A Christmas Carol, there's lots of parallels. Frank also had a love that he lost, who's Claire, played by Karen Allen, who we see their whole relationship.
He does not deserve her, even a little.
I guess you just said a thing that makes me think that maybe it's time we get into it.
Yeah.
Did we like this?
No.
I didn't hate it.
I didn't like it.
I kind of liked this movie when I was a kid. Like, I saw this movie a lot. I saw this movie many times.
Of course you did.
Over many Christmases on, like, USA and TNT when I was a kid.
You know, it's funny because I would see it and, like, skim past it.
Yeah.
It never caught my attention. I was never interested, I think. And I'm not saying I'm not now. I'm just saying as a youth, I was never interested in a modern version of A Christmas Carol.
Yeah. I remembered liking Scrooged, but I hadn't seen it in maybe 15, 20 years. I do the thing I normally do, which is I go on like Letterboxd to see what have other people I'm friends with and people I follow, what do they think of this movie? And what happened with this one is like I saw a bunch of people that I like did not like this movie and gave it like low ratings. And I was just like, oh no, am I wrong? Is this movie not good? Not that your opinion should be based on what other people's opinions are of something.
But often it is.
But sometimes it is. And it definitely made me go into it thinking, let me try to be a little more critical of this. And not just assume, oh, it's good because I liked it when I was younger.
Yep.
It turns out it's not that good. It's got a lot of problems.
Well, the funny thing is the problems that it has are not necessarily related to the Christmas Carol adaptation portions of it. The problems that I had are related to like everything else that they tried to add. And again, it's not to say that you can't add stuff to A Christmas Carol because I think it can take it.
Yeah.
It's more like the stuff that they added I was not engaged by at all.
Right.
Like the whole, like, first of all, I think I don't need or want Scrooge to have a current love interest. That doesn't do anything for me. And a lot of what he does is like to please her or to win her back. And I did not think that didn't work for me as a motivation for the character Scrooge to change and become a better person. It just didn't, for me personally, it did not work.
I liked the idea of it, but I didn't like the execution of it. So, like, here's the thing that they did that I actually really liked, which is every time he meets a new spirit, he then gets a period of time where he's waiting for the next one.
Yeah.
After he meets the spirit of Christmas Past, who is played by David Johansen. Do you know who David Johansen is? He's the lead singer of the New York Dolls.
Huh?
Do you remember Buster Poindexter?
Nope.
Really?
No.
That was David Johansen.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Anyway, David Johansen plays the Ghost of Christmas Past, takes him throughout his whole past. We see him as a little kid. His father is played by his brother, Brian Doyle Murray.
There's
the Murrays
a lot of
are
Murrays in this. Yeah, so many Murrays.
Yeah, like his brother, it's not his nephew Fred, it's his brother James, who's played by John Murray, his actual brother.
There you go.
Their other brother Joel is like at the party that James is hosting with his wife Wendy, who's played by Wendy Malick. I don't know what was going on. Anyway, and Brian Doyle Murray plays their dad. So all the Murrays are in it, which is cute. But he takes Frank through every stage of his life. We see him as a little kid. Then we see him as like a 17-year-old played by a 38-year-old Bill Murray with long hair.
Yeah, we do.
And then we see him at every kind of stage and up until where he loses Claire, because he only cares about work.
Right.
And then he comes back and he's immediately like, oh my God, I lost Claire. I shouldn't have let that happen. So he goes to the homeless shelter where she works because, of course, she is a paragon of virtue.
Yeah.
And
she never married, we find out. Remember, she runs into him at the beginning. She's like, oh, yeah, no, it's just me.
He tries to get her back. Of all, she's totally game for it. Even though he was an asshole, she wants him very badly.
Yeah. But also, like, her only objection is like, hey, I need just like 5 minutes to finish out my job before I can come with you. And that is not acceptable to him.
And that's one thing I liked. I like the fact that he actually does go on a journey.
Because he actually hasn't changed.
Even
he wants her back, but he hasn't changed.
He's starting to go on the journey. He's starting to learn something. He learns that he wants her back, but he hasn't done anything he needs to do to get her back.
Yeah.
So he's trying too hard too early to get her back.
But
I
think
like that from a screenplay standpoint. I just didn't think it worked in the movie.
I didn't think it worked in the movie, but the other thing is, like, again, if we're going to compare this to Jane Austen, he wants her back. He doesn't deserve her yet, but yet she wants him.
Yeah.
The movie's kind of saying, well, he needs to continue to go on this journey, but he's already won her back. I wish it, much like Darcy, that she was like, no, you're an asshole, and if you want me, you have to change and show me that you've changed and prove to me that you've changed. I can't just take your word. And she's not doing that. She's just like, oh yeah, I just need a couple minutes, I just gotta finish up work and I'll come. Yeah, absolutely. And he's like, no, you come with me now or never. And it's like, fuck you.
Like, she gets mad, but she should have been mad.
She should have been mad before.
The second he walked in the door. I think my big problem with the movie is that the movie is like, Richard Donner is going for something. He's going for big physical comedy, really intense, in-your-face comedy. But he's not a comedy director, so I just don't think the comedy works. Like, I think Bill Murray is funny in this movie sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's Bill Murray. Like, apparently he did what he normally does. He had a huge ego and was like, if I'm going to do this, it needs to be up to my standards, so I'm going to mess with everything. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. I know better than everybody.
Yeah.
And to some extent he does. To some extent he doesn't. And he did some funny things in this movie.
Yes, there was one scene that I did like. He's with the ghost of Christmas Past, who's like this weird ghostly taxi driver, and he takes him to his childhood home, and his mom's there, and it's Christmas, and she's pregnant, and he's like this little boy watching TV, and the ghost says to adult Bill Murray, you know, I've cracked guys tougher than you. One look at their mama and they just start crying.
Yeah.
And
Niagara
he's
Falls.
like, in Niagara Falls. And he's like, fuck you. No, that's not going to happen. And sure enough, like, there's this little scene and the mom is real sweet and she's going off to bed and she just says, like, hey, I love you. And
I love you, Frankie Angel.
I love you, Frankie Angel. And he's like, bruh. But he doesn't get mad at the ghost of Christmas Past. He's just like, yeah, you were right.
Yeah.
And I like that. That was sweet.
There's a line later where he's telling everyone, because he keeps going down to visit the set for the Buddy Hackett, Scrooge show.
Yeah.
And he just tells everyone in his biggest Bill Murray way, everyone break a leg. I got a really weird feeling about tonight.
Yeah, that was the line that I liked. We were trying to remember what that line was, and that was...
I'm probably paraphrasing
I think it was like,
it.
tonight's gonna be weird,
Yeah.
or something like that.
But it was good.
Well, I really resonated with that, like, as a director of things, like, it's gonna be weird. I don't know, break a leg.
Yeah, it just went really, really big. The Ghost of Christmas Present is Carol Kane.
Yeah.
Playing this little, like, ethereal ballerina fairy.
Yeah.
But incredibly violent. Like, they decided that the thing that defines her relationship with Frank is that she's constantly beating the shit out of him and hurting him a lot.
Yeah.
And so they clearly, like, worked with stunt people and did all kinds of things. She does horrible things to him.
Yeah, she Home Alones him, like, for real.
But, like, it's never funny. Like,
yeah,
I understand,
it's not funny.
I understand that they're jokes, but they're not funny.
Yeah.
It's just big and physical with no point.
Yeah.
But I think that's Richard Donner. I think that's Richard Donner trying to do big comedy. But at the end of the day, he's not a comedy guy. His most successful stuff was not out and out comedy.
I don't think this doesn't work as a Christmas Carol adaptation. I think it doesn't work as a movie.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's a good movie.
I agree with that.
If somebody said, no, they really loved A Christmas Carol and they were really trying to bring it up into the present day, I would believe that. I wouldn't be like, no, fuck that. It was cynical. No, I believe it. But I just don't think the movie works to sit down and watch as a movie.
Yeah, like the stuff from A Christmas Carol is like the best stuff in this movie.
Yeah, totally.
And it's a smart adaptation in a lot of ways. It just, as you say, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Should we move on?
Just a couple months later, you added Magoo. I added this one.
That's fine.
I wanted to watch Blackadder's Christmas Carol from 1988. To give everyone some context, Blackadder, Great British Show, ran for like 4 series, starring Rowan Atkinson as several different characters throughout different periods of history. He's always playing a Blackadder. I think you should take this because I think you know it better than I do.
So series 1 is like Richard III times, like 1400s. I don't think they went back that far in this version. So series 2 is Elizabethan, series 3 is like Regency, and series 4 is World War I.
Right. So series 3 was called Blackadder the Third, and series 4 was called Blackadder Goes Forth.
Right.
This came out between those 2 series.
Right.
So Blackadder Goes Forth had not come out yet. It was like a year later.
Yeah.
So it was just it was a Christmas special they did for Blackadder, the show that people know. And the whole way it's set up is that he's now a new Blackadder, in the line.
Yes, and this is Victorian Blackadder, which makes sense because that would be the next one chronologically.
Playing Ebenezer Blackadder, who runs like, what is it, mustache shop?
A mustache shop.
Okay. He's got like a little guy who follows Baldric. Who follows him around in every version.
I'm so sorry. Have you not seen any Blackadder?
I've seen some Blackadder. Okay. I know the general idea of Blackadder.
I've seen all of it, so the funny thing was when you said to me, that was more of a Blackadder retrospective than a Christmas Carol, I was kind of like, yeah, I had seen it. That's why it didn't occur to me that we should watch it as an adaptation of a Christmas Carol. But we should watch it because it's important and we got to cover all the Christmas carols.
But I think the thing we found out is that the beginning of it, I think the first 15 minutes of it is a great adaptation of A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
In that it's a very intelligent adaptation of A Christmas Carol, in that it's a complete reversal.
They flipped it on its
head.
Of
everything.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing about Blackadder is that he's a piece of shit.
Right.
And the whole thing about Ebenezer Scrooge is that he's a piece of shit.
Right.
So of course it makes sense that Scrooge would be a Blackadder.
Right.
But what they've done instead is Ebenezer Blackadder is the nicest guy in the fucking world.
Right.
He's generous and wonderful and all the same types. Like he has like a niece who's kind of like nephew Fred, but she's terrible and takes advantage of him. And it's really funny up until when he starts to go on his journey.
Right.
Because then at that point, like you say, it becomes a Blackadder retrospective.
Right.
Because what happens is like the ghost of Christmas past, who isn't really the ghost of Christmas past as much as he is like the spirit of Christmas.
Sure.
It's like one ghost.
Yeah, it's only the one ghost.
It's Robbie Coltrane.
Right.
As like a
ghost.
He's like the ghost of Christmas present, basically. Right. Big jolly with a big beard. I can't think of any other Christmas character that it reminds me of. And so he says, "You're a great guy. I'm not here for you. I don't even know why I'm here. I usually scare people into being better people. You're great, though, not like your ancestors." And this guy's been taken advantage of like crazy. And he says, "Well, tell me about my ancestors." He says, "Okay." So then we get an extended scene from the second series of Blackadder.
Yeah.
And they come back, and then we get an extended scene of the third series of Blackadder. And then they come back. And the thing is, so in A Christmas Carol proper, what is the thing Scrooge learns by going back and looking at his past?
He's like, "Oh man, I've been terrible. I'm a dick. I surely am.
And I shouldn't be that way.
I shouldn't be that way."
What does Ebenezer Blackadder learn?
Wow, being a dick would have been very profitable throughout the years.
Yeah, and so his big arc is that he learns to be a dick and he becomes a Blackadder by the end of it. Which, like, that to me is a really smart adaptation and send up of A Christmas Carol.
Sure.
The problem is those vignettes where they go back is not A Christmas Carol anymore.
Yeah, because it's not actually him. It's just the past.
It's just a scene that they wrote that could have been in the second or third season that takes place at Christmas.
Right.
They're not doing anything where like this Blackadder is in the past watching them and interacting with the spirit and learning while it's going on. It doesn't use any of that. It's just we need a framework to do like a best of Blackadder.
Yeah.
So like I could absolutely see how this would please, kind of like I was asking with the Magoo one. Who is it pleasing?
Who is it pleasing?
I could see this pleasing fans of Blackadder.
Yeah.
I wish that it would please fans of A Christmas Carol,
sure,
but I don't know that it's necessarily trying to do that.
That's
even
fair.
Though I thought it was super smart at the beginning.
Yeah. Sidebar, just going off of your thing of like, I don't know what jolly person at Christmas that would be. I was watching something this morning with Calvin.
Yeah.
And there's Santa on TV, and he's in this big thing where he will point to anything and say, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" So he pointed at Santa and he said, "What's that?" And I did not feel up to teaching him about Santa. So I said, "That's the ghost of Christmas present."
I didn't know you did that. It's brilliant.
And he said, "Okay."
That's brilliant. I love you. It's perfect. I don't want to move on without saying who's in this, because it just is so important to remember that like everyone you've ever heard of was in a Blackadder at some point, because it's like Rowan Atkinson, Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie, Miranda Richardson, Robbie Coltrane, Miriam Margolyes, Jim Broadbent. Like it's got a heck of a cast.
It's a heck of a cast.
And it's pretty funny.
Yeah. It's pretty funny, but I wouldn't watch it if you don't know anything about Blackadder or don't care about Blackadder.
Yeah, I ended up doing this thing. I thought maybe we could do it together, but what I found out by the end is that it's not the kind of thing that brings you joy. It just brings me joy.
Yeah.
So I started doing it. I wanted to come up with like a ranking for all of these Christmas carols. And it became a personal ranking for do I think they're good adaptations of A Christmas Carol? And it's really weird because I really enjoyed it and it was really funny, but I put it like way down near the bottom. Like the only one that's below it is the Jim Carrey one.
Wow.
Because
it's not a good adaptation.
It's not a good adaptation. It was not a satisfying adaptation. Not that, but I still think Christmas Carol could stand to be adapted in this way.
Yeah.
Like I actually wish they had gone farther and made it more of a send up of A Christmas Carol. But that's not what they wanted to do.
That's fine.
And so that was Blackadder's Christmas Carol 1988.
All right, we got 2 more to go. These are kind of the 2 big ones. Let's try to get through this.
Musical number 4. Just of this episode.
Yeah, this episode alone.
Can you give like a little background on how this musical came to be? Because it was not written for the screen.
No, this was written for the stage. It was written by Lynn Ahrens, who normally pairs with Stephen Flaherty. She writes the book and the lyrics, but in this case, she paired with Alan Menken, who wrote the music for The Little Mermaid.
Yeah,
you know how like your hometown theater might do a Christmas Carol every year,
sure,
like your little repertory or your little community theater,
either like the one-man show or like a big
different
production.
version. Who knows? Yeah. This was that, but for New York City. So it was like this musical that was written for this theater at Madison Square Garden, and it was performed seasonally for many years. This was information that I did know, but I just looked up the Wikipedia article to verify that was correct, because I didn't want to say anything that was like actively super wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to mention, it does have a list of the cast, like throughout the years, because sometimes people played the same role over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But it looks like for Scrooge, it usually did change, like year to year, somebody different took on the role each year. So I would like to read out who was Scrooge each year of this production, because it is kind of amazing. Okay, 1994 original cast, Walter Charles. I don't really know who that is. 95, Terrence Mann. Okay, well-known actor.
Yep.
96, Tony Randall.
Okay.
97, Hal Linden and Roddy McDowall.
So they like alternated?
They must have alternated.
All right. I like both those guys.
98, Roger Daltrey.
Oh, wow. He probably was very good.
I'm sure he was. 99, Tony Roberts.
Okay.
Of Broadway fame.
Yeah.
2000, Frank Langella.
Okay.
My arch nemesis.
Yeah.
2001, Tim Curry.
Wow.
2002, F. Murray Abraham.
Wow.
2003, final cast, Jim Dale.
Wow.
It's prestigious.
That's big.
It's big.
Jim Dale? Pete's Dragon, Jim Dale?
Pete's Dragon, Jim Dale.
Pete's Dragon, known for nothing other than Pete's Dragon, Jim Dale?
Yes, and apparently in 99 and 2001... Oh, he played it a bunch of times. The role of the Ghost of Christmas Present was played by your friend of mine, Reginald Bell Johnson.
Hey!
Who's so good.
I wish he was in this movie.
Yeah, but like this guy, Paul Candle, played the ghost of Jacob Marley like every single year. It was... Not
Jason Alexander?
No, Jason Alexander was never even in it once. Yeah, a lot of times it looks like people came back year after year after year. Mm-hmm. But I don't see many other
you only
very
get to see
large names.
I was about to ask you, you only get to see one of those performances. Which would you go see?
Tim
Obviously,
Curry.
it's Tim Curry.
Obviously, it's Tim Curry.
I think I would go see F. Murray Abraham.
Yeah.
That just sounds... But I think I'd go see Tim Curry.
Yeah. But if you went to see Tim Curry, you would also get to see Reginald Vell Johnson. So that really that caps it for me.
That's fine.
All right,
I'm
fair
fine
enough.
with that.
And Robert Westenberg actually was in it as Fred.
Here's the deal.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you went through all of that.
Yes.
Because I think it's important to talk about this the bona fides, because this is created by
is a real deal.
Real deal fucking Broadway musical people.
Yeah.
And starring lots of real deal
folks, yeah.
And
it was on at Christmas time. Like this is what people would bring their kids to see, like year after year. Like New York City, like sophisticated New York City children went to see this thing.
Can I make a bold assumption and then make a statement?
Yes.
Here's my bold assumption. I don't know. I'm making an assumption because I've never seen it. I bet this was pretty awesome to see at that theater at Madison Square Garden.
Oh, I'm sure it would have been great. Like the whole experience.
Because the musicals is a pretty good musical.
As a musical.
But I could see it being a really fun stage production.
Yeah.
At Christmas.
And it was staged like theatrically. Right. It was a musical.
The statement is, this is not a good way to show this.
Yeah.
This is not the way to watch this.
No.
It must have been good in the theater. The movie's not good.
No, it's not. And the funny thing is, so this movie is from 2004, so they had just done their final performance the previous year. So I think someone must have thought like, oh, let's keep this momentum going. We're not going to perform it live anymore, but this is going to be preserved for all time for posterity. So now, instead of having to go to the theater to see this play, you just get to watch Kelsey Grammer do Scrooge for the rest of time.
I love that you think that's what they said. I can almost guarantee that's not what happened.
There was money involved.
Yeah, this was NBC saying, we need properties for big TV events. It's basically the thing from Scrooge.
Yeah.
Like, we need to do a big musical Scrooge. What can we do? Oh, that music, we'll get the rights to that.
Yeah.
And we'll do it.
But I just think it was interesting that it was the following year.
Yeah.
That it had previously ended.
I bet there was like a plan in the works for a long time that they needed to wait until it was done before they could do the rights to do it on TV.
I mean, that makes sense.
Okay. You already mentioned the man himself, Kelsey Grammer, as
Yeah.
Ebenezer Scrooge. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is it Kelsey Grammer playing Ebenezer Scrooge?
No.
How would you describe it?
I would describe the level of performance here, the sort of broadness.
Uh-huh.
The level of performance here, okay, is the episode of Frasier that I don't think exists, but should exist, where Frasier gets cast as Scrooge in his Community's production of A Christmas Carol, and he starts getting upset and frustrated with everyone else because they're not measuring up to his level of professionalism, and he's overdoing it, and everyone's mad at him because they're just there to have fun.
Like, it starts with Kelsey Grammer, and it
Yeah.
ends with Ebenezer Scrooge, but
Yeah.
it's Frasier's right in the middle
Frasier's
of it.
right in the middle, and this was like prime Frasier too. Like, when did Frasier end? Like, right about this time, right? Like, this was his thing.
I think so.
Yeah, this was right when Frasier, I can tell you, this was right when Frasier was ending. It was like 2004-ish.
Yeah.
His performance is just so not good. It is so broad, and there are a lot of flaws. There's a lot of flaws in this that I think could have been not magnified had his performance. He's not doing the Michael Caine thing. He's doing the opposite of the Michael Caine thing.
Mhm.
He's doing like, I'm the main character, and it's not fair that I don't get any of the good jokes. So I'm going to do all this mugging and do like a weird voice, and my accent's not very good, but I sound like Frasier.
He's not trying to do a British accent.
No,
he's
he's
just
not
doing
even a little.
an elevated, proper American accent.
Well, that's why he sounds like Frasier, because
Right.
that's the voice he puts on when he does Frasier. Was also produced, I believe, by his wife at the time, Camille Grammer, who was one of the original Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, or Orange County. Real Housewives of Orange County, like the original series,
Sure.
season 1,
Back
like
when people didn't know.
back when this was the first
how
franchise.
big it was going to get.
Yeah, it was Real Housewives of Orange County, I want to say. He treated her like garbage, and she's the only person on any Real Housewives program ever that I have any sympathy for, because he was so awful to her and their children. And he left her, and he left those children, and he never saw any of them again. And that all happened sort of around this time. But she executive produced this.
Mhm. So it hadn't happened yet.
It makes me so angry how he treated Camille.
Okay.
It is a nice early 2000s cast, though. Like, it is very much of its time.
Very much, and like a lot of bona fides. Like, it's not just Alan Menken and Lynn Ahrens that are the bona fides, because, as I say, Jason Alexander plays Jacob Marley. He's a real Broadway guy.
Mhm.
Jane Krakowski is this Ghost of Christmas Present.
Mhm.
Ghost of Christmas Past.
Past.
Yeah, past. And she's like, this is Jane Krakowski before like 30 Rock. This was like Ally McBeal. Also, like, her being on Ally McBeal and singing all the time was a thing to make people happy who knew that she was legit Broadway.
To be clear, what we're talking about here is Frasier, Seinfeld, and Ally McBeal.
Yeah.
Like, those are our 3 stars. This is a big prestige production.
And Law and Order.
Yeah.
Because Jesse L. Martin is the Ghost of Christmas Present.
And Party of 5, because Jennifer Love Hewitt's there.
So it's a huge TV cast of that time, but all like people with singing and stage bona fides.
Right. Jane Krakowski, do you remember the scene with her? It's really an awkwardly directed production. She was doing those like ballet splits, like on the bed.
Directly above Scrooge while he's in his 4-poster bed.
Oh my God.
It doesn't. Okay, so this doesn't work. I want to throw out a name, and this is the name of a person who I genuinely don't think is responsible for this not working.
Yes.
And that is director Arthur Allen Seidelman.
God damn it.
Who I'm assuming
Grand tradition.
is also a member of the tribe. But
Seidelman.
I don't know.
Seidelman.
I don't know that. So it's not good. I don't think it's his fault, because I think things like this,
You just are along for the ride.
you're just along for the ride. You are hired to get it done. The script exists.
You don't get to cast it, probably.
The cast is there. The schedule is there. The locations have already been scouted. This is not a passion project for the director.
For Seidelman?
Oftentimes. So I don't think it's good. I don't think it's Seidelman's fault. But here's the big problem with this. The big problem with the movie is that it is shot like a musical.
Yeah.
So everyone's constantly cheating out, and the camera is always where the audience is.
And everything's very well lit.
Extraordinarily well lit. Like, they're constantly saying, like, it's time for bed, Tiny Tim, and we're going
like,
through
right, like-
Christmas Eve, like, middle of the day, high noon in
Well, there
London.
was one point where the very beginning of the movie, they're in like the London Exchange, which is an indoor building, and I looked at you and I was like, in the universe that they are living in, what is the light source in this building? There's not a candle to be seen, but bright as day.
It's like two aspects of the same problem bothered us equally, but they were different, because you were really bothered by the lighting. I was really bothered by the cheating out.
Yeah.
And it really made me think throughout this whole thing, like, this actually would have worked so much better if they had just shot the show with an
Yeah,
audience.
yeah. That would have
Because
been great.
so many of the lines feel like they would get a laugh or get a reaction, but because there's no live audience there, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So they didn't do any work that would have been necessary to turn a stage musical into a movie musical.
It's true. Before we leave the cast, there's at least 2 other people that we have to talk about.
Yes.
One is someone who I did not quite recognize her face, but when she started to sing, by God, I recognized her voice. It's your friend and mine.
She's my ride or die.
Jeremy's ride or die. Ruthie Henschel of Les Mis fame, criminally underused, basically steps on stage, sings a very bland song, and steps back off stage again, doing her goddamn best as a working professional actor. The only person in this movie I would go so far as to say who can sing very well.
There's a lot of people who can sing
There's
very
a lot
well.
of people who can sing okay.
Jane Krakowski and Jesse L. Martin
There's
are
a lot
good
of people who can
singers.
sing okay. Ruthie Henschel is not the same league.
No.
Despite both of them, as you pointed out, having performed. I mean, all these people have performed on Broadway. Jason Alexander was in The Producers. Kelsey Grammer, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Like, Kelsey Grammer's been in a lot of, or not Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, La Cage aux Folles.
Right.
So Ruthie Henschel, and then
She plays Scrooge's mom.
she plays his mom.
So he sees
his
her
mom
in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you recognize Tiny Tim.
Oh, yeah. Oh, holy shit. Yeah, we got to talk about Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim is little 10-year-old Jacob Collier. And I got so excited when I found out about this. And you were like, who the fuck is Jacob Collier? What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
And some of you know Jacob Collier. I have been a big fan of him on YouTube for a long time now. His videos have a lot of views. And what did you see in his bio that...
I just was reading his Wikipedia bio. You hadn't shown me anything of his yet. And I was just reading his bio, and I just kind of went, oh, he's an innovator.
Yeah. He's just one of those people that lives and breathes music. And he has lived and breathed it for so long that now when he has the chance to make music, he's like, I don't want to make music I've heard before. I want to make some weird music. And so he makes weird, fun music. He's a good music boy who knows music very, very well.
Yes.
And he's great. I'm going to link to my favorite video of his. He did one of those like an expert explains to like a kid and a high schooler and an expert, and like it's just him talking about music, and he ends up talking about it with Herbie Hancock, and it's pretty cool and it's a neat video. And Jacob Collier's the real deal.
Yeah, well, in this he's 10.
He's 10. He was pretty good.
He was not bad.
He was pretty good.
I mean, he gets the big song at the end. Like,
Yeah.
he closes it out as Tiny Tim. I mean, I'll just say, not in closing, but just as sort of an overarching theme, I don't think this works. I have some problems not only with the production, the transfer from live to screen, but dare I say, some of the original conceit I have a little bit of trouble with. There does seem to be a heavy influence in the music and writing of this from Fiddler on the Roof for some reason.
A bit.
Because Jacob Marley's big number, when he's singing about greed, is very klezmer influenced.
Mhm.
Just the musicality of it. And the dancing, again, I sometimes do go down this path of, is this anti-Semitic that the Greed song is a klezmer band song? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe not.
I don't think so. I think they were trying. I think Alan Menken was trying to make it sound fun,
Yeah,
and klezmer is fun.
it is fun.
and it's Alan Menken.
Yeah.
I don't say he is if we don't know.
Okay. Wait, hang on. I just
My
need
God.
to check something. Alan Irwin Menken was born, blah, 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 French hospital in Manhattan to Judith and Norman Menken. His father was a boogie-woogie piano-playing dentist. His mother was an actress, dancer, and playwright. His family was Jewish.
There we go. No, that's fine. Just we need to know these things before we say them.
Or we assume. Never assume.
Don't assume. But anyway, I think he just assumed like this should be a fun song. Hey, what are all the styles that I know? Oh, klezmer's fun.
Yeah.
He may not even have been thinking about it intentionally.
Well, because he didn't write the lyrics.
No.
So just the combination of the two perhaps is slightly unfortunate. The dream sequence, the bed in the graveyard, I turned to you and I was like, is this Tevye's dream? And then we had like the screaming ghost and everything. It was very...
There's like a lady on wires being floated across screaming. And like Firma Sarah is in this production of A Christmas Carol. She's there. Oh, by the way, the other thing that happens during the funeral scene is like they're in a graveyard. All the ghosts are singing at Scrooge.
Yeah.
There is his 4-poster bed is in the
Yeah,
graveyard.
it's Tevye's dream.
Right? And he's dead in the bed. And there's a funeral happening. And Scrooge goes, whose funeral is this? It's
Perhaps
amazing.
it worked better on stage. We don't know. We weren't there. Did you had a couple more points you wanted to make before we wrap this up?
I just had a couple. One line made me cry, and I don't want to assume the moment was unintentional, because Tiny Tim is talking to his dad when they're all around the table, and they're talking about next Christmas. And Tiny Tim says, "And you won't have to carry me ever again." And what he means is, I'm going to be able to walk well.
Yes.
And you won't have to carry me.
But the dramatic irony is,
if you know the story, you know that his dad is never going to have to carry him again because he's going to die.
Yeah. No, that was intentional for sure.
I started crying.
Yeah.
Not ashamed to admit it. That's a beautiful moment. That's good writing. And I applaud them for it.
And little Jacob Collier delivered it beautifully.
Did a great job with that. Why did I write down, and then something that happens that we have never seen in any other version? Because in every other version, after he's done meeting the ghost of Christmas Future, Scrooge wakes up.
Yeah.
And he's like, ah, because he's just gotten the whole ghost of Christmas yet to come. I'm going to die and everyone will hate me and forget about me.
Et cetera, et cetera.
But I'm awake. I am alive. It is Christmas morning. I haven't missed it yet, et cetera, et cetera. I must stand on my head.
Yeah.
He's always really happy to wake up because what he has just witnessed is something really horrifying. In one of them, he literally goes to hell.
Yes.
In this one, he's in the graveyard and he is suddenly visited by the spirits of all of these people, including his dead sister and their dead mom, who he loves. And then he wakes up and he's happy to wake up. But in the context of the scene, he's so happy to see them. Like, I don't understand why he's happy to wake up when he has these people that he hasn't seen for years that he loves.
Right. It doesn't work to make the dream happy. The dream has to be so bleak that he's happy to wake up.
Like, it's really happy, and they sing really supportive, loving stuff to him.
Dramaturgically, it does not work.
Right.
Yes.
That's my problem with it. It's dumb. Can I read, to close this one out, can I read a line from Brian Lowry, who was the TV critic for Variety? Can I read what he wrote in his review of this?
Sure.
He said that the film was the 37th best production of A Christmas Carol he'd ever seen, and the third best musical version behind Albert Finney in Scrooge and Mr. Magoo.
Fourth best behind Muppets.
But it doesn't matter that we disagree, and we can quibble over where the Muppets should be in that one, but that's a great way to close that one out.
That's right.
And you know what? Here's the deal. We're done with your little family Christmas carols that you can watch with the kiddies.
The tonal shift between this one and the one we are about to end on could not be greater.
This one hadn't even been released when we did our first episode.
Yeah.
Couldn't have watched it if we wanted to because it came out in 2019. It was a 3-part miniseries, debuted on the BBC and then on FX in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Hulu. Directed by Nick Murphy. It was written by Stephen Knight. Stephen Knight was a guy I'd heard of. I didn't realize just how much he's done. He wrote some movies, Dirty Pretty Things, Eastern Promises, Spencer.
Spencer's supposed to be really good.
Yeah. He wrote and directed Locke, which is a movie about... Have you ever wanted to see Tom Hardy in a car by himself for 90 minutes?
No.
Because that's this movie, and apparently it's very good. He co-created Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
I mean, this is a man of many talents.
And he created Peaky Blinders,
okay,
which is like the gritty
Victorian thing.
Gritty Victorian thing. So that's clearly where he was coming from. Guy Pearce's Ebenezer Scrooge. It's not your daddy's Christmas Carol.
Can I just show you the one note that I wrote? This is my only note for all 3 hours.
Please. Intercourse.
Can you just describe?
It's just all caps. It's just the word intercourse. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
This one's hard to talk about.
For more reasons than one.
Yeah. I want to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, that like I think this story can survive anything, and it has the ability to be good regardless of how you do it. Like, we literally watched one that's Mr. Magoo for an hour.
Yeah.
Like, if there was ever anything that was kid-friendly, it's that Mr. Magoo version. Our favorite one has Muppets in it.
Yeah.
Super kid-friendly. This one is not for kids. Scrooge says fuck. He's not the only character
everyone
that says fuck.
Everyone says fuck.
It is dark
you see
and
a
fucked
butt?
up. There's a butt. And people had varied reactions to this. We had varied reactions to this. Did you like it?
On the balance.
Yeah?
No,
Okay.
I did not like it.
Okay.
Did you like
I
it?
fucking loved it so much. I was so here for it. Everything it did, I loved every minute more than the last. I loved it. I don't recommend it. If you want to watch,
cannot in good conscience.
like, if you happen to be in the Venn diagram of someone who is just ready to watch something really dark and emotionally challenging, but also you're kind of a fan of A Christmas Carol, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But if you don't want that stuff, like, don't watch this because it won't be satisfying at all.
Well, I think that's where I landed.
Yes.
I think that's where I landed. I appreciate what the creators were trying to do.
Yeah.
This is a thing these days that, like, we saw it with Anne with an E. We've seen it with a couple of things that it's like, no, we want someone with a troubled past. We want to show what the more realistic, dark, gritty version of that might well have been.
Mm-hmm.
Anne with an E really did it for me because that was a version of the story I was here for, which was like, no, I really want to know what happened to her. I don't just want to see this like sunny side of this, like, you know, this sweet orphan. This was more like it did not hit the notes that I guess I wanted to see in a version of A Christmas Carol.
But this brings me back to the thing I was saying at the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
what is A Christmas Carol? What are the things you need to have in an adaptation?
Yeah.
And I found out that we kind of are looking for different things.
Yeah.
Not wildly different,
No.
but just a little different. Because I found out that the thing that I'm looking for is I want to see a story about a guy who learns to be a better person by the end.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. And so if you removed Christmas from it completely, I would still be interested in it.
I guess I found that I wanted to see the Christmas part
Mm-hmm.
more strongly. The resolution at the ending, I guess, is the thing that appeals to me, which is like, I've hurt these people and I've come around, and
Mhm.
now we're going to have a relationship because I have found true repentance. And there was something that Scrooge did that we'll certainly get into
Yeah.
that crossed the line of potential repentance for his actions to such a degree. I just remember thinking, I don't know how they're going to end this thing now, because there is no way that this guy shows up at this woman's house with a turkey on Christmas Day and all is forgiven. And if he had, that would have been terrible.
Yeah.
That would have been absolutely dramatically unsatisfying. And to their credit, he didn't. And I knew he wasn't going to. I was like, oh, they have gone down a different path. Here's what it is. It became a story of someone so irredeemable that I didn't give a shit what happened to him. And I didn't care if he was redeemed or not. I understood what they were trying to do. They were trying to really take you on a journey and essentially say, like, some actions are unforgivable, but you as a person can be redeemed and move forward from things that have happened to you or that you have done in your past. And that is a fine message.
Mhm.
I just didn't care about this Scrooge at all based on his actions. They went very dark and gritty with his past. And I just want to separate the things that happened to him
Mhm.
as a child from his actions as an adult that made me feel that this Scrooge was irredeemable, or rather that I didn't care if he was redeemed or not. And I think they went so dark that they could not claw themselves back from that place of darkness. I think that's what they were going for, and I think they succeeded. I just didn't find that it had what I wanted in the story of A Christmas Carol.
Which is the Christmas stuff.
Yes.
And it's there, but not really.
Yeah.
It's a very dark Christmas.
It could have been anywhere, anytime. It had nothing to do with Christmas.
The reason I loved it is I just happened to be here for what it was trying to talk about. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of what my impression was, because I haven't really heard from the creators that this is specifically what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But it certainly seemed like it's what they were trying to do. So the story from my perspective is it's a story of a man who endured abuse as a child and then carried the damage of that into his adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
which is a thing that happens.
Sure.
And the damage of it basically allowed him to be a bad person and to not really ever worry about being a good person,
Mm-hmm.
because he thought he was a bad person. And so why should he ever try to be anything other than a bad person?
Yeah.
Because he thought he deserved what happened to him when he was a kid.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I thought they did a pretty good job walking that line of not conveying to the audience, like, oh, this bad thing that happened to him, the fact that he was a victim of terrible abuse, made him a bad person. I don't think they were saying that.
No.
I think they were saying exactly what you said, and I actually think they did a pretty good job conveying that the subtlety or the nuance of that message, which was this bad thing happened to him. He never really came out of it. He thought he was a bad person, and that's why all these bad things happened to him. So as you say, I'm just repeating what you just said, but like, he never thought about being a good person. He thought he was a bad person, and bad people do bad things.
Right. But then it goes a step further because it ended up doing something that I really liked, which is that I feel like in a lot of versions, you really empathize with Scrooge. And because he isn't irredeemable. That's the thing you find out, is that he was actually like, he was a good person. He went down a wrong path.
Yeah.
And it turned out he was redeemable. So we can do some empathy with him. With this, though, you empathize so much with the people around him. Like, so for example, at the end of A Christmas Carol, he reunites with two characters that he has alienated at the beginning of the movie.
Yes.
He has alienated Bob Cratchit because he treats him like shit.
Yep.
And his whole family doesn't like him, and except for Tiny Tim, who's a good person. But like Mrs. Cratchit hates him.
Yep.
And he reunites with them and shows them, I am a good person, and we can now have a good relationship. And he also reunites with his nephew, Fred, who he has always treated like shit, but Fred has always had a hand outstretched to him because he always wants him to be part of his family, but he's never been willing to do that. And so in every version, he goes back to Fred and said, some version of, are you willing to accept in a stupid old man who has realized the error of his ways?
Yes.
Okay? And he always does.
Yes.
Every single time. This one is saying, well, let's push everything further. He is so much worse than any version of Scrooge we've ever seen. Never kills a person with his own hands, but like does a lot of things that leads to the death of a lot of people.
And ponies.
The ponies. We actually find out that he does care about animals, which is a nice little character touch throughout. Like, I found him a compelling character, even if I didn't think he was a good character.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening by the end... And I know I'm spoiled. Like, this is a thing I really enjoy.
It's fine.
But like, if you don't want to be spoiled and you're at all interested by what we're talking about, go and watch it and come back. But like, he doesn't reunite with these people.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that happens at the very beginning, when Fred comes to visit him, we hear this extra piece of information from Fred.
Loved this.
Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I just found it so realistic for anyone that's ever had to deal with any kind of family estrangement. The fact that Fred came to him and said, I need you to do one thing for me. One little thing to prove that you're invested in this relationship and continuing this relationship. And out of context, this doesn't look like a thing that would be reasonable to cut you off for not doing it. But I'm telling you that the stakes of you not doing it are that we will no longer have a relationship because you cannot take one step forward to meet me where I am and have this relationship with me. And I thought that was just so real. Like, in the realm of human experience, I've never heard a Fred say that. And I've rarely really heard a character say that. It felt just incredibly real, which was like, I need you to make this gesture. If you don't, then that is telling me that
this is the last time I'm ever going to ask.
I'm going to walk out this door and I probably will never see you again until you die. If you don't do this thing. And he didn't do this thing, and that was the end of the relationship.
Yeah, he never, like, I actually, at first, I was really upset that he never goes back and visits Fred at the end.
Yeah.
But
actions have consequences.
That's the thing. Actions actually have consequences. And if this exists more in the real world, I can watch a story about someone redeeming themselves but still having to live with the consequences of their actions. And one of the consequences of his actions is that he doesn't have a relationship with Fred anymore.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, it's just so funny. We're talking about this. I'm super invested in this. I love talking about this. I find it fascinating. But for me, it's not A Christmas Carol.
I was ready for it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that happens is that we find out how he has wronged the Cratchits.
It's not good.
It's not good. Do you want to describe it, or do you want me to describe it?
Okay. I would like to describe it because I think you had an emotional response to it. So I'll just describe it and you can talk about your feelings.
Well, I had an emotional response in that I liked it.
Sure.
Even though it was unpleasant.
But
incredibly unpleasant, but I liked it.
Let me say what it was, and then you talk about how you felt about it.
Yeah.
So Bob Cratchit worked for Scrooge for many years. He has a wife named Mary. She is great. Real
Ebenezer
good mom.
Scrooge, by the way, played by Guy Pearce, and Bob Cratchit is played by Joe Alwyn, and his wife is played by Vinette Robinson.
Yes.
They're all very good.
They're all very good. She's great. And they've got these two kids, and they're just a real sweet, nice family. Their daughter is the older child. That's Belinda. And then they have, of course, Tiny Tim. I think they don't really call him Tiny Tim. They just call him Tim.
This came up in another version.
Yeah.
Like I think Scrooge calls Tiny Tim to his face.
Yeah.
And we realized, oh, wait,
we don't call him Tiny Tim.
We don't call him Tiny Tim to his face.
Yeah.
We refer to him as Tiny Tim to other people.
Yes. And Tiny Tim, or Tim, has dwarfism. So he has a medical condition that is very apparent. Both the actor and the character presumably have this medical condition.
The actor is this kid named Lenny Rush.
Yeah. He was so
good.
Cute. oh my God, he was adorable. You did such a good job. But he was the only person cracking jokes the whole time. He was just like, but he was like, he was like the funny kid in the family because their life is hard. So like his role is to make jokes, which I appreciated. And so what we learn is that he was born, they're worried about him. Like he's obviously got this physical differences that was not great, back in the time. And the thing that everyone keeps kind of like pointing back to happened now at this point, like 7 years ago, because he's like 9 or 10. And this happened when he was like 2. He needed this operation. He couldn't breathe. Like he was having bad problems and they needed like a lot of money and they couldn't get it. They didn't have anyone. And we learn that what Bob has been told by his wife for many, many years is that she's a rich cousin in America who gave them the money. Bob has been suspicious of this
for as long as he's been told that it happened.
Can remember, because that does not seem right. And basically what
she's always super weird about it too.
Yeah, and like we sort of are worried for a while, like over the course of this 3-hour miniseries, like, oh my God, what did she have to do to get this money? Because clearly it's not the rich uncle in America. And what we learn is that she went to Scrooge without her husband's knowledge. She begged him for the money. He said, Scrooge has a lot of long monologues in this, and that was part of what didn't.
He's like a very scientific person.
Yeah.
He's very like he has lots of theories and hypotheses about human nature, and he's always doing experiments on people.
This is weird coming from me,
like mental experiments.
Because I like wordiness. It was too wordy.
Yeah.
Like the script was too much for me. But anyway, he says, like, come back tomorrow, come back on Christmas Day to prove you're serious, and I'll give you the money. You're just going to do whatever I tell you.
You're going to come to my apartment. You're going to do whatever I tell you.
And so she obviously thinks this is sexual in nature. And so she comes back. This is the part that I wrote down in my notes. If there's a hint of absurdity in something that's supposed to hit you very hard, I tend to focus on the absurdity because I don't want to feel my feelings when I watch something. So she comes back and he's got this whole speech going on and she's like, listen, I got to get back to my family. Like, let's get this done. And he's like, well, what do you think? What do you think I asked you? I'm curious to know. What do you think it is? And
she's already said, I will do whatever
you want. And she's like, you're really going to make me say it? And he's like, yes, I actually would derive pleasure from that. And she goes, intercourse. And I just started laughing because I was so uncomfortable. But also because this woman would not know the word intercourse. Like it was such a wrong note. It was such a flat, weird note that then they started talking about intercourse and my soul left my body and my skeleton shriveled down into a pile of dust. I was so uncomfortable with Zai about the word intercourse being used so much. But anyway, she takes off her clothes. He's like, I just wanted to prove to myself that anyone would do anything for money. Put your clothes back on. I don't want you. Here's the money. And she leaves and she's felt very bad and guilty about it ever since.
And hates him.
As you would.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
And so once we already kind of assumed that he wasn't going to show up on their doorstep with a Christmas goose.
Yeah.
But then once we saw that, we knew, oh, he's definitely not. There's no way he can show up on their doorstep with a Christmas goose.
It's awful.
So one thing that this does that I really enjoyed is that a problem I've had with a lot of other versions of Scrooge is I kind of ask myself sometimes, why am I invested in what happens to this guy? I don't really care that much sometimes about this old piece of shit. Why do I care that when he dies, he's going to have these chains put on him and he's going to have to walk the earth forever?
Yeah.
Like, why do I care that much? This one did a thing where, like, I was actually really invested in it because I wanted to see this asshole haunted so badly.
Yeah.
I was delighted by the edit. Before the ghosts actually showed up, he was such a shit. I was like, I am delighted by the fact that he's going to be haunted by these spirits.
Yeah.
Because he deserves it. He's so bad, he deserves everything he's going to get. And the thing he learns by the end of it is, yes, I do deserve everything that I got in this, because I was really terrible to a lot of people forever, and I used my own trauma as an excuse for it, but that's not an excuse for treating other people badly, and now I have to live with the consequences of my own actions.
Right. And the thing that this also had that we haven't even talked about was probably the thing that you kept saying you wanted to see was Marley coming back to intercede for him.
Yeah.
Like there was a big plot with Marley and we see Marley like all the way through it, like kind of trying to help him and guide him through this and say like, look, you're my friend. if you're redeemed, I'll be redeemed, but we're a pair in this. If you're not redeemable, I got to go to hell, and I don't want to go to hell. I would prefer, well, it's not even hell, it's just kind of purgatory. We see him like in his grave, like being disturbed at his rest.
The whole show opens up with this kid showing up and pissing on a grave, and it's Marley's grave.
And that's how you know,
whole thing.
That's how you know the thing is going to be fucking dark, because it literally starts with a boy pissing on a grave.
But like, then we see his whole, we get to see his whole deal.
Yeah.
We see him get the chains. We see him make the deal. We see why he's invested in this. And Scrooge's redemption gets tied to his redemption.
Right.
If he can work with the spirits to get Scrooge redeemed, he can prove that there's good in him, he will get redeemed as well, because all the shit that Scrooge did, Marley was complicit with all of it.
Yeah.
You know? I just appreciated it as a new version of the story. It's not like I was watching this thinking, oh, I wish every other version did this. No, it's more like, I'm glad someone did it. I'm glad we have one dark, fucked up version of Christmas Carol in case I'm not in the mood to watch
Muppets.
You know, because I'm not always in the mood to watch Muppets, even though I'm often in the mood to watch Muppets. So yeah, as you say, Marley's there the entire time. Do you want to talk about the spirits for a second?
Yeah, like real quick.
Ghost of Christmas Past. It's Andy Serkis.
Yes.
Which is not what we're used to seeing. He's like a big bearded guy, which is kind of weird for Ghost of Christmas Past, but he's like a big bearded guy, and he shows up, and the thing that we find out is that he kind of shifts into whatever person was most appropriate for that point in Scrooge's past.
Yeah.
So he's
his father.
He's his abusive father. He's Ali Baba, like the character from the book that Scrooge read when he was a boy at school.
Being abused by this awful headmaster who's also Mr. Wickham, which was really hard to watch.
From the 95 Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
He's very good in his one scene, even as dark as it is. Like, we've always gotten a version where Scrooge doesn't get to go home for Christmas like all the other kids because his father always has an excuse and his father's a dick.
Yeah.
And doesn't love him, and that's why he always has to stay there. In this one, it turns out, no, the reason he has to stay every Christmas is because I already put a trigger warning at the beginning. I'm so sorry for this, but the thing that he finds out is that his dad had made a deal with the headmaster. He basically got like a discount.
Or like they waived the
Or they
fee.
waived everything if he let Scrooge stay every Christmas so that the headmaster could sexually abuse him.
Yes. Let's not dwell on it. I just wanted to, I think it's important to mention how dark this gets.
Right. And I actually think it deals with it in a way where if they've made the decision that that's the kind of shit they're going to bring up, they don't like dwell on it.
It's not graphic in any way.
Like,
it's very heavily implied.
It is implied that it
happens.
happens.
It's implied and also acknowledged.
Yeah, it's acknowledged that it happens, but it's never shown.
Yeah.
Which is good. But we find out about it in the context of the last Christmas he is ever at school, because his older sister in this one shows up with a fucking gun to rescue him from the headmaster.
Yeah, and that part was the thing that didn't super work for me plot wise.
I liked it because the thing that I found interesting was what the spirits were trying to teach him. He felt like the audience of A Christmas Carol going, here's what you're trying to teach me. And they're like, no, you're not getting it. You're never getting what we're actually trying to teach you. And because the lesson he needs to learn is complex, it's not just you should have always been a better person.
Yeah.
It's you used your trauma as an excuse to do terrible things, and you need to want good things to happen to other people, but at the same time understand that you need to live with the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
That's way more complex than any other version.
Yeah, like this wasn't your fault. You're not a bad person, but also you did harm.
Yes.
Because at the end, just kind of quickly skipping to the end, the thing that he needs to say is not, I beg of you to be redeemed, because he's like, I won't say that because I don't deserve it. I was bad.
Yeah, that's the part that really got me, is that he genuinely feels at the end of the story, the thing we find out is the reason why he's unwilling to change is not because he thinks he's great, it's because he hates himself and blames himself for his own trauma.
Yeah, but all I want is for this little kid to be okay, because he saw Tiny Tim die.
Yeah, we have to watch Tiny Tim drown.
So, like, it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
And he's so cute. And the minute he says that, everything snaps back into place. Like, that was the thing he was supposed to say. That was the thing he was supposed to do. Marley can rest easy in his grave. Mm-hmm. He's going to get another chance because he valued, for the first time in his life, he valued someone else's life above himself.
Right.
And that was the thing that he needed to do.
And I think it's important to talk about what he does after that. But really quickly, going back,
yeah.
He spends a really, really long time with the Ghost of Christmas Past.
It's a long time.
Andy Serkis is really fun. It's like half of this 3-hour thing is Ghost of Christmas Past.
It's a lot.
Then we get to the third episode, and then we finally meet Ghost of Christmas Present, who is his sister. his sister Lottie.
Yeah.
And she's been dead. We've met her son already.
We never see him again.
Yeah.
She doesn't care to see him.
Well, we don't know that she doesn't see him.
Yeah.
We just know that she doesn't see him with Scrooge.
Right.
And I think that speaks to what I think we got out of this, which is that relationship
Some relationships
is gone.
are broken. Yeah.
Scrooge went too far.
I truly appreciate that.
I like to think that separately she did, like after her death, go and visit her son to see how he was doing.
Yeah, like she can go wherever she wants. She's not just there for Scrooge. Yeah,
right.
Fair enough.
So she takes him to see things that are going on in the present, and then she leaves. And then we meet the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, who's not like a Grim Reaper character. He is a really fucked up guy whose mouth is sewn shut in like a creepy with a top hat. Like it's dark and like quote unquote fucked up, you know? But he takes him to see what happens in the future, and the thing that Scrooge sees is he sees Tiny Tim drown.
Yeah.
And he sees Tiny Tim drown the day after Christmas. Like in every other, it made me so happy as a fan of A Christmas Carol, because in every version, Scrooge always says, I haven't missed it.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't missed Christmas. He hasn't missed his chance to have a happy Christmas.
Yeah.
In this one, he sees Tiny Tim die on the following Christmas day. So when he wakes up,
he's like,
on
I gotta
Christmas
go
morning,
save
he's
this
like,
kid.
I haven't missed it yet. I haven't missed my chance to save Tiny Tim's life.
Yes.
It's so much more intense and important in that moment.
He's like, do not go on the pond. You will fall through the ice and die. Do not go there.
He goes and he like has this delightful thing where he's running through the streets kind of crazy, grabs gravel that people put on like ice to stop people from slipping, puts it on the pond so no kid can skate on the pond. And that way Tiny Tim's not going to die. And then he runs to the Cratchits. And this is not the first time he's been there, because of course his sister took him there.
Right.
And he got to see their family. And then he got to find out, like in the past had already shown him all the things he did to Mrs. Cratchit.
Right.
No, the Ghost of Christmas Past doesn't show him that. We see it through his own memory.
Right.
The Ghost of Christmas Present needs to make him think of what he did to Mary in the past.
Yes.
He's not shown it by a spirit. He finally thinks about it.
Yeah.
Which I'm given to understand he hasn't been willing to think about what he did.
Right.
And now he's willing to think about it. And we see all the things that he did to her.
Because one of the things he was shown, because one of the things that the Ghost of Christmas Past had to show him was this mine collapse that he caused.
Yeah.
But he never saw it because he wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with Mary, he knows that happened because he was there.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting distinction, that like a ghost has to lead you to see things that you didn't care to think about because you didn't take the trouble to find out.
Mm-hmm.
But this was like, he knew what happened. He was there. He just is choosing not to think about it.
Totally. So we've seen all of this. He goes back to the Cratchits, busts the fuck in like a crazy man, and he does a series of things we have never seen Scrooge do before. Because in every version, what is the way that Scrooge makes peace with the Cratchits?
He gives him a turkey and he says, you get a raise, and like, let's talk about it tomorrow, and I'm happy as a clam, happy Christmas.
And I'm going to take care of Tiny Tim.
Yeah.
And in some versions, you get your job back because I fired you in this version. In this one, he runs in. Mary's like, get the fuck out of my house. And he goes, I know, I'm so sorry, but I need to say 3 things really quickly. First of all, Bob, he knows he accepted a different offer.
Yeah.
Part of his deal with Mary is that she had to make sure that Bob never quit.
Right.
And
or he'll tell.
Yeah, through the Ghost of Christmas Present, he finds out that Bob tells Mary, like, no, I get a different offer. And she's like, no, you can never leave him.
Yeah.
And he says, Bob, I know about your other offer. Go.
Godspeed.
You don't work for me anymore. I'm not going to treat you like shit anymore. You never have to deal with me ever again. Take this better job for more money. Second of all, here's 500 pounds. I am so sorry. All I have is money, and I can give you that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make your lives better with the 500 pounds. And you never need to see me again. And Tiny Tim, you are alive. And it is important that you are alive because you're a good person.
Please don't go on the ice.
And he leaves, and the last scene is between him and Mary. And it's basically him essentially saying, you're free of me. I'm going to go try to be a good person, but you're free of me.
Yeah.
We do need to wrap this up. But there's one last thing.
Right, with her.
Do you remember one of the things she says to him day that he did the horrible thing to her and she's leaving?
She cursed him.
Yeah.
She cursed him. Again, this is the thing that doesn't super work for me. I'm not sure they wrapped it all up in a bow. I know they're trying to make her be an important character, but I didn't quite get the relationship between her cursing him and summoning the spirits and the whole Marley thing, where we learn that his relationship with Marley is what summoned the spirits. Because she says, I hope a spirit comes to you and tells you all the things you've done, and I have the power to do that because I'm a woman and we
can do such things.
We can do such things.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's sort of her speaking into the air saying like, hey, spirits, thanks for doing that, but we have a lot to do, you and I.
Yeah.
And it ends with her, which I think is great. I think all of that is great, but I don't understand the relationship between her thing and Marley's thing.
Well, no, I think it started with her. She called the spirits.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, well, the way we're going to get through to him is with his partner, Marley.
Yeah.
So they bring Marley into it, and then they make the deal with Marley.
Okay.
Everything started with the spirits.
Yeah.
But it started
but
with
Marley's
her.
saying, this is important to me because, okay. So they're saying like, Marley will let you have a chance for redemption if you do this thing.
It's not even redemption. It's more like you were resting, and we're not going to let you rest.
Yeah.
And you get to rest again if you do this thing for us.
Okay.
So he's their tool in doing the thing for her.
It did not make sense the way you explained it. I'm just saying, for what I'm looking for in a Christmas
Yes.
Carol, it is a little convoluted in terms of the plot.
But that's totally fair. But what we get at the very end, to me, was an incredibly satisfying ending to a miniseries.
Yes.
And personally, a satisfying end of a version of A Christmas Carol, because he has this moment with her where he's like, he's suddenly found peace. And he's like, I'm going to go off into the world and try to be a better person. But I understand that we don't have a relationship because I did horrible things to you that you never. She says to him, I don't forgive you. And he goes, I understand. You shouldn't forgive me for what I did. I'm going to go try to be a better person anyway because that's the right thing to do. And that is a complicated thing. And I appreciate that we saw a version that tried to do that.
Yeah.
Do you want to go back through and do some quadrants?
Let's do it.
We've seen so many Christmas carols now. 1935, Scrooge. Do you think they cared about the source material?
No. Yes, because he played it forever. Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Was it successful?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. 1938, A Christmas Carol. Do you think they cared about A Christmas Carol?
No.
No, this was like a B movie.
Yeah.
This was something they didn't put a lot of. Oh, yeah, I didn't tell you this. It was rushed into production in October 38 and then released in December of 1938.
Wow.
So, like, I don't think they cared.
It's not a passion project.
Is it successful? Yeah. It's fun.
Joe Mank knows what he's doing.
1954 episode of A Shower of Stars. So starring Frederick March, Christmas Carol. Do you think they cared about the source material? No. Was it successful?
Yeah.
Kind of.
No.
No. Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, 1962. Did they care about A Christmas Carol?
No.
Weirdly, it almost seems like they did because that was the only thing that was important to them.
Weirdly, maybe.
Was it successful? Like, yes, and that
yes
makes
and
me say
no. Yeah, like yes and no for different reasons.
It was a successful version of A Christmas Carol, but that made it not a successful version of Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol.
Very strange.
Okay. 1970, Scrooge, Albert Finney. Did they care about the source material?
I think so.
Seems
like it.
Was it successful?
Yes.
Scrooge, 1988. Do you think they cared?
No.
As smart as the script was, I'm going to agree with you. I don't think they particularly cared. Was it successful?
I'm going to say no.
I'm also going to say no. Blackadder's Christmas Carol. Did they care about the source material?
I mean, no.
Was it successful as an adaptation,
of Christmas Carol? No.
No, thank you for watching it with me, though.
You're welcome.
A Christmas Carol, 2004, based on the Madison Square Garden musical. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Do I think the direct...
Do you think Lynn Ahrens cared about the source material?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't think Seidelman cared about the source material.
I think Lynn Ahrens brought a lot of interesting things to the story
Yes.
that made me think that there was some care that went into
Sure.
it. Was this particular TV production of the musical successful?
It was not.
No.
It was not.
Are we given to understand that the stage version was successful?
I mean, it ran for a decade.
I'm given to understand that it was. I would have liked to see Tim Curry in it. 2019, A Christmas Carol. Dark, Not Your Daddy's Christmas Carol. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Someone must have.
I think
so.
I think they
Someone was like,
did.
I got to explore this.
This felt like a passion project. Was it successful?
For me,
Yeah.
no.
That's fair. Like, was it successful as a satisfying to all version of A Christmas Carol?
Absolutely not.
No.
Was it satisfying to Jeremy in the place in his life and emotional journey for what he wanted to see? Apparently, yes.
I kind of loved it. Hey, we did it.
Oh, we did it.
Christmas Carol Part 2. That's great. And I'm going to say again, we'll do this again next Christmas, but this time I think I mean it because there's
so many more.
Way more to choose from.
So many more.
All right. Well, this has been Adapter Parish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads, and you can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 3 great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated. Third, we are on Patreon. This show will always be free, but if you become a patron, you can get access to Adapter Parish Plus, our bonus show that releases every other week between episodes of this show, and our patron-only Slack community. It's been a lot of fun, and all the details are at patreon.com/adaptcast.
Do you want to do this together?
Let's.
God bless us, everyone.